I used to think our house at 34 Hawthorne Street was safe, that my mom, Jessica, was just careful. My name's Max Winslow, and when I was 10, I didn't realize how fear could twist love into something that felt like a cage. Mom had always been a nurse, precise, neat, the kind of person who washed her hands twice even after wearing gloves. But after that minor car accident a few years back, something in her changed. Her fear grew teeth. She stopped going out alone, stopped trusting anyone she didn't know, and little by little, she started treating me like I was something fragile, something that could break if she blinked too long. The backyard became the only place I could breathe. Even then, it wasn't really mine. She'd chain the gate every morning, double lock it, and hover by the kitchen window, her reflection ghosting over the glass. I'd ride my bike in slow circles, pretending to explore, but I always felt her watching. Every car that passed, every neighbor who waved, every barking dog, in her mind they were all potential threats. "Don't talk to strangers, Max," she shouted one afternoon when I waved at Mr. Perkins, the mailman. Her voice shook as if the words were holding back something bigger, a panic that never left her. At first I told myself she was just being protective, but soon her protection turned into commandments. No sleepovers, no playdates, no unsupervised calls. Anytime I tried to reach out or to have something that was mine, she saw it as betrayal. I started hiding things. Notes I wrote, sketches of the park, tiny trinkets from friends. Anything that might give her reason to question me went into secret places. Under the loose floorboard, inside my old backpack, beneath my pillow. I lived in quiet rebellion. Inside, the house smelled like antiseptic and pine cleaner, like the hospital she could never seem to leave behind. Every creak in the floor, every shadow in the hallway seemed amplified. Mom installed security cameras in the kitchen and living room. "For your safety," she said, and I learned to move quietly, whisper quietly, breathe quietly, without meaning to. I became like her, cautious, hyper-aware. The outside world started to feel enormous and dangerous, while the inside became small and suffocating. School was the only place that felt halfway free. I'd watch kids laugh, run, ride bikes with the wind in their hair. I'd imagine what it felt like to be trusted. But I knew freedom came with consequences. I tested the boundaries anyway.
Small acts.
A wave across the street, a secret note tucked into my backpack, a letter to Emily, the girl down the block. When Mom found one of my letters, her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. "You can't do this, Max. You don't know what could happen. People are dangerous," she whispered, voice breaking. She took the letters, slammed the closet door, and that night a new camera appeared, this one mounted above my bed. From then on, I felt its blinking red light even when my eyes were closed. Sometimes I tried to argue. "Mom, I'm not a baby. I can take care of myself." Her eyes would go wide, wet with terror. "Do you want something bad to happen to you?" Every time she asked that, something inside me froze. I learned to nod, to agree, to stay quiet. Saying no wasn't defiance, it was betrayal. At night, I'd lie awake listening to her pacing the hall, the soft scrape of her slippers across the wood floor. Sometimes she whispered to herself words I couldn't make out. Other times she'd stop outside my door, breathing shallowly as if making sure I was still there. Thunderstorms were the worst. One spring night, lightning cracked outside and I reached for my sketch pad, a small, innocent comfort. She turned on me instantly, eyes wild and full of fear. "Do you want something to happen?" she hissed. My heart thudded. I nodded, mute, learning again that agreement was safety. It wasn't just the rules that trapped me. It was the invisible weight of her fear, how it filled the air, how it seeped into me. I loved my mom. God, I did. But I was beginning to hate the way her love felt like a prison. And yet I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when the walls themselves seemed to bend around us. Protective, suffocating, alive. Whispering her lessons in every creak and echo. By the time I turned 11, my small rebellions grew more careful, more deliberate. I wrote letters I'd never send, drew maps of the park I wasn't allowed to visit, sketched the world as it might be, open, bright, untouched by my mother's shadow. But Mom always found a way in. One afternoon, she caught a note I'd written for Emily. Her face went bone white. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Max, you can't do this. You can't." Then she tore the paper into confetti-sized pieces, her eyes glistening like I'd almost shattered something sacred. That was the day I learned survival didn't come from strength, it came from disappearing. I learned to move softly, to keep my voice low, to make myself smaller. At school, I smiled when people expected me to, laughed when I should, answered questions without revealing anything. Group projects made my stomach twist. I hated when kids leaned too close or touched my arm. I never told anyone my plans. I became precise, cautious, a version of myself that existed only in the spaces between words. Mom's protection seeped into every crack of my identity. Even when she let me outside, my joy was fractured. The swing set became a trap, the slide a warning. I could hear her stories looping in my head. Kids who vanished, dogs that mauled, strangers who waited. Adventure became a forbidden word, and yet something inside me still pushed back. I hid new letters in my closet. Took quick bike rides while Mom was distracted. Sometimes I'd peek over the fence to watch other kids play. Their laughter carried by the wind like a sound from another world. The taste of freedom was addictive, but every attempt came with the threat of discovery. Her voice would slice through the air like a blade. "Max, what are you doing?" Panic would flood me before I could even answer. My heartbeat would pound in my ears. Every escape, every stolen moment felt like walking a tightrope between hope and terror. It wasn't until middle school that someone finally noticed. My art teacher, Ms. Parker, started watching my drawings more closely. The ones filled with locked doors, barred windows, faceless people, empty streets. One afternoon, she crouched beside my desk and said softly, "These are powerful, Max. What are you trying to show?" Her voice was calm, safe. It was the first time in years I felt seen. I answered in fragments, half-truths, hesitant words about rules and fear and being watched. She listened. She didn't press, but she didn't look away either. Soon after, child services came. They spoke gently, like stepping through a minefield. For the first time, I saw my mother perform for strangers. Her smile too wide, her words sugar-sweet. "I'm just a careful parent," she told them. The world isn't safe these days. But I knew what her eyes were saying underneath that smile. "You betrayed me." For weeks, I stayed with a foster family. Their house smelled like pancakes and laundry detergent. They gave me space. I rode my bike around the block without asking. I laughed out loud. I tasted birthday cake for the first time without guilt. It was dizzying, the absence of fear. That freedom, though, came with echoes. I flinched at sudden voices. I hesitated when someone reached for my shoulder. When people smiled, I wondered what they wanted. Mom's lessons were stitched deep inside me. The world is dangerous, trust no one, stay small. Even when the locks were gone, the fear stayed. By high school, I was quieter than most. By college, I was determined to understand it. I studied psychology, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. I wanted to map the shape of fear, to name the thing that had built itself inside me. I learned about control, about trauma, about the fine line between protection and possession. And that's when it hit me. Mom had loved me in her way. But her love had been poisoned by fear, transformed into something that trapped instead of nurtured. Her care became surveillance. Her affection became control. Years later, I still think about that house on Hawthorne Street. The smell of cleaner, the blinking red light of the camera above my bed, her voice trembling through the walls. I don't see it as home anymore. I see it as a place where love and fear were tangled so tightly that I forgot how to breathe. But I also see what came after. Growth, healing, slow, clumsy trust. I learned that freedom isn't loud or reckless, it's quiet at first. A fragile thing you hold close until it feels safe to let it bloom. Love that isolates, that controls, that smothers with warnings. It isn't love at all. It's ownership. Real care lets you step into the world even if you might fall. It gives you the courage to try again. I still move carefully. I still listen for footsteps in empty hallways. But I live now with friends, laughter, risk, and choice. The invisible chains she left behind still rattle sometimes, but they no longer hold me. When I think back on that summer of 2024, I still can't decide whether I found the house or if the house found me. The divorce papers were barely dry that April. My hand shook as I signed my name on the final page, the sound of the pen scratching like something closing forever. Owen and I packed what little we owned into the back of my dusty Subaru and drove through the fog-draped hills of Ashwood, Oregon, until we reached 89 Pineview Crescent. It looked like a postcard, an old craftsman with white trim and a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. The realtor had left the lights on for us, warm and golden, catching the gleam of polished oak floors. I told myself this was it, a fresh start, a place where my son and I could finally breathe again. But underneath that hope was something darker. I was desperate to show Owen that I could give him a real home after his father's betrayal cracked our lives down the middle. "This house," I told him, standing in the empty living room, "is our fortress. Nothing bad can touch us here." That first night, I tucked him into his new room, the walls painted a soft blue, the air thick with that sterile scent of new beginnings. He wrinkled his nose. "It smells too clean," he whispered. I laughed it off, brushing his hair back. "That's just the varnish, sweetheart." But the word stuck in me like a splinter. In those first weeks, I threw myself into perfection. Curtains hung at symmetrical angles. Photos lined up like soldiers on the wall. I scrubbed the cabinets until my reflection blinked back from the wood. Control became my armor. If everything stayed just right, maybe nothing else would fall apart. Owen was quieter. He spent hours drawing, his pencil whispering over the paper while his eyes flicked to the corners of rooms as if expecting something to move. At first, I ignored the small things. The coffee mug left out, though I knew I'd put it away. The bathroom door that drifted open after I'd shut it tight. Houses settle, I told myself. They creak, they breathe. But at night, when the air thickened and the floorboards sighed, I could have sworn I heard faint whispers rising from the attic. I told Owen never to go up there. "It's dusty. Dangerous," I said. He just nodded. But his gaze kept wandering to the narrow pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. Forbidding something, I realized too late, is the same as planting curiosity like a seed. It was a rainy Thursday when I caught him in the backyard, hunched near the tree line, talking softly to himself. His sketch pad balanced on his knees. "Owen?" I called. He startled, snapping the book shut. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "No one," he said too quickly. His face was pale, lips tight. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I found his sketchbook left open on the coffee table. Page after page of dark, spindly figures stared back. Tall shapes crouching in corners, their limbs stretched too long, their heads bent like they were listening. My stomach tightened. When I asked him about them the next morning, he muttered without looking up. "They wait in the attic." The certainty in his voice chilled me. I told myself it was just imagination, divorce stress, a child's way of making sense of loss. Still, I started checking the locks 3 times before bed, walking the house with a flashlight like a sentry. Each time I passed beneath the attic hatch, something heavy pressed against my chest. Then one evening, I found the front door unlocked. Panic surged through me. "Owen?" I shouted, running from room to room. No answer. The silence felt alive. Then I saw it, a faint glow spilling from the attic. My hands shook as I climbed the ladder. He was sitting there, cross-legged on the dusty board, surrounded by his toys, papers torn, eyes wide and glassy. "Owen," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "What are you doing up here?" "They won't let me sleep," he said softly, pointing toward the far corner. The shadows there seemed thicker, pulsing almost like something breathing just out of sight. For a split second, I thought I saw movement, tall shapes shifting, folding into the dark. My breath hitched. Then it was gone. "Come on," I said, forcing calm.
"Let's go downstairs." I lifted him, clutching him so tightly he squirmed.
"It's okay," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. After that night, the house changed. Doors slammed, though no wind blew. Books fell. Frames cracked. I'd wake to footsteps above us, measured and slow, crossing the upstairs hall. Owen hardly slept. His drawings grew frantic, crowded scenes of the house surrounded by shadowy figures pressing in from every side. And every night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I felt it too. That quiet, watching wait, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something neither of us could name. At school, the teachers started calling more often. They said Owen seemed distracted, that he stared out the window instead of answering questions. I told them it was the divorce, that he just needed time to adjust. But deep down, I wasn't sure. There was something hollow behind his eyes lately, something that didn't feel like grief. One night, I decided to stay in his room. I wanted proof that everything was fine, that all the strange feelings were just stress and exhaustion. Around midnight, Owen stirred in his sleep. Then suddenly his eyes opened, sharp and alert, as if he'd been listening all along. "Do you hear them?" he whispered. The words made my stomach tighten. I listened. For a moment there was only rain against the window. A slow, steady rhythm. Then something else. A faint murmur. Not quite voices, not quite wind. Words I couldn't understand threaded through the sound of the rain. My skin prickled. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed the attic ladder, each creak of wood echoing in my chest. The beam sliced through darkness, catching on dust motes and broken boards. Nothing moved, but it felt like someone had just stepped out of sight. Like something had been there and slipped away the moment I looked. When I turned back, Owen was gone. I tore through the house, shouting his name until my throat burned raw. I checked the closets, the bathroom, the yard, even the street. Nothing. The house was too still, too silent. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. When I called the police, my voice shook so badly the dispatcher had to ask me to slow down. They searched the house, the woods, the whole neighborhood. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the mud, no trace of a boy who had ever been there. They left me with nothing but questions and that look, the kind that says they think the problem isn't outside the house but inside me. Days blurred into weeks. I stopped showing up for work, missed deadlines, let calls go unanswered. Friends came once or twice, but the way they looked at me, at the dark circles under my eyes, the shaking hands, told me they wouldn't come again. The house wouldn't let me rest. Every night I heard footsteps in the hallway. Light, quick ones. Owen's. I'd rush to his room, throw open the door, whispering, "Please, please be there." But the bed was always empty. Sometimes I heard him calling from above. "Mom!" Just that soft pleading. I'd scramble up the ladder, heart racing, only to find the same dusty boards, the same corner that seemed to pulse with shadows that bent and breathed. A neighbor mentioned him once, casually over the fence. "Saw a boy in the woods last night," he said, sipping his coffee. "Looked like your son." The world tilted. I couldn't remember the night Owen disappeared. Had I really been there with him? Had the attic light been on? Or had I dreamed it? My memories felt like water slipping through my hands. Warm, real, and gone the moment I tried to hold them. In the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. My eyes looked wild, my hair tangled, my skin pale and tight around my bones. Sometimes I wondered if Owen had ever existed at all. Maybe I had built him out of loneliness and fear. Maybe my mind, already cracked from betrayal and sleepless nights, had conjured a child just so I wouldn't be alone. But then I'd open his sketchbook, pages full of those tall, spindly figures crouched in corners, and I'd know he was real. Once. By autumn, the house had devoured me whole. Every creak was a footstep, every whisper a name. I stopped leaving entirely. Bills piled at the door. Work emails went unanswered. I drifted through the rooms, whispering for Owen, waiting for a reply that never came. Sometimes I heard him laugh, light and distant, echoing down the hall. Once I thought I saw him standing at the end of it just for a second, his face pale in the half-light before the dark folded over him again. I went to the attic one last time. Sat there for hours, dust clinging to my clothes, the air heavy as sleep. "Give him back," I whispered. "Take me instead." My voice cracked. I would have given anything for a sound, a sign, something. But only the house answered, groaning softly, wood shifting, the wind brushing through the eaves like a sigh. Now, months later, I don't know where the truth ends. Maybe Owen was taken. Maybe he ran. Maybe he never existed outside the walls of my unraveling mind. But the attic still waits. It always waits. Some nights, when the wind moves through the trees, I swear I hear a boy's laughter drift from the woods. I press my hand to the glass, heart aching with a mix of hope and dread. Maybe he's out there. Maybe he's gone. Maybe I've been chasing echoes all along. But the house, our perfect shining fortress, has teeth. It keeps what it claims, and I think it still holds us both. Because sometimes the most dangerous hauntings don't come from the shadows around us, but from the ones we carry inside. Fear, guilt, the illusion of control. They whisper until love turns to obsession, and memory rots into madness, and in the quiet that follows. I used to think my family was perfect. That's the cruel trick of childhood. How the walls you grow up inside feel like a fortress even when they're quietly collapsing. I remember our house in Aberdeen under winter skies. Tall gray stone walls slick with rain, windows glowing gold against the cold. To everyone else, we were respectable. A lawyer father, a mother who baked bread that made the whole street smell like heaven, and a daughter who smiled politely every Sunday at church. People envied us. They didn't know. My father, Robert Morton, was a drinker, not the friendly kind who sang pub songs, but the kind who turned liquor into fuel for fury. I learned early to recognize the rhythm of his footsteps, that dangerous quiet before he exploded. Sometimes he threw things, sometimes his hand found my arm or cheek. The bruises were never obvious. He was careful like that. My mother, Margaret, never stopped him. She prayed instead, whispering scripture like it could hold back his fists. The night he was arrested, I was 17. He'd attacked another man at the pub, swinging wild until the police pulled him off. I remember watching them drag him away, sirens flashing across our walls, thinking, maybe this was freedom. He was gone, locked up, just Mom and me now. I wanted to breathe again, to believe we could start over, and for a while I did. She seemed strong at first. Eliza, she told me, we'll be all right. God doesn't break families unless he plans to rebuild them stronger. Her chin lifted, voice steady. She took over the bills, smiled for the neighbors, walked into church beside me like a survivor. But the cracks showed fast. She stopped sleeping. I'd wake to find her scrubbing the floor at 2 a.m, humming hymns through clenched teeth. She locked the front door with 3 deadbolts, muttering about keeping demons out. I told myself it was stress, but something in her eyes had changed. Mom, I whispered one night when I found her polishing silverware, her hands red and raw. You don't have to do this. She didn't look up. If I don't, who will? You think anyone cares about us, Eliza? You think God will do it all for us? Her words chilled me. That wasn't the woman who used to braid my hair before school. I didn't understand then how love could sour into something else, how grief could ferment into madness. By the winter of 1998, I was losing her. By spring, the house felt like a cage. I buried myself in schoolwork, sketching buildings, dreaming of designing houses one day, places that kept people safe instead of trapping them. But every time I spread my notebooks across the kitchen table, Mom's eyes lingered too long. One evening, she stared at a sketch of a glass tower. False kingdoms, she muttered. What? I asked. God doesn't want us building towers to the sky. That's pride, Eliza, that's sin. I laughed nervously. It's just homework, Mom, not the Tower of Babel. Her hand slammed the table. My pencils jumped. Don't mock me. Don't you dare mock the word of God. I froze. She'd never yelled at me before. That night I found my sketchbook burning in the fireplace, pages curling into black ash. A few days later, Hannah, my best friend since primary school, came over wearing a red scarf her grandmother had knitted. Mom's smile vanished the instant she saw it. Take that off, she snapped. Hannah blinked. Excuse me? Red is the devil's color. You won't bring curses into this house. Mom, I hissed, it's just a scarf. Her eyes glittered. She won't step foot here again. She's plotting against us. Hannah left in tears. I stood trembling, humiliation burning through me. You're losing it, I whispered. Her hand flew before I could flinch. The slap cracked across my cheek, sharp personal final. I'd felt my father's blows before, but this one broke something deeper. Later that night, she knelt by her bed, rocking and praying, while I touched the sting on my face and realized my mother was slipping somewhere I couldn't reach. The neighbors began to whisper. Small things at first, Mom shouting at Mrs. Callahan about the gas bill, slapping another neighbor who offered help. Then came the boiling water. 2 officers at the door, calm voices, gentle words. Mom threw scalding water toward them, screaming, You're Satan's soldiers. I'll never forget the way the officers looked at me afterward, pity flickering behind their eyes, tangled with unease. One of them said softly, She needs help, miss. But you can't force her unless she's a danger to herself or others. She is a danger, I cried. Can't you see that? But paperwork, procedure, bureaucracy, everything moved slower than her madness. At night she wandered the hall whispering prayers, fingers grazing the locks on my door. I'd lie there with my heart pounding, waiting for the moment the whispering would stop. Because silence meant something worse was coming. One morning I tried reason. Mom, please, People are worried. I'm worried. You need rest. Maybe talk to a doctor. Her eyes flared. You think I'm crazy? You think I don't see what they're doing? They want to tear us apart. They want to steal my angel. I'm not your angel, I whispered. I'm your daughter, and I'm scared. For a heartbeat, her face softened. Fragile, human again. Then she turned away, locking herself in the bathroom for hours, chanting until her voice went hoarse. The house stopped smelling like bread. It smelled of bleach and burnt paper. It sounded like locks snapping shut. It felt like love buried alive under fear. When the social workers came, I thought salvation had arrived. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, pens scratching, voices gentle. One woman said, Eliza, if your mother doesn't accept treatment, we may have to consider foster care just until she gets better. Foster care? The words lodged in my throat. I was almost grown, but leaving my room, my sketches, even those haunted walls, felt like losing the last scrap of home. Can't you just help her? I begged. They tried. But Mom refused. She screamed scripture at them, called them agents of the devil. I watched her toss their pamphlets into the fire, her face glowing with feverish triumph. That night, I heard her pacing outside my door again. I pressed my back to the wood, clutching the kitchen knife I'd hidden under my pillow. Her shadow swayed beneath the crack of light. She muttered prayers about purity, obedience, sacrifice. I bit down on my tongue to keep from making a sound. The next morning, she cornered me in the kitchen. If you ever betray me to them, Eliza, if you ever let them take me away, God will punish you. Do you hear me? Her voice was sharp, but her hands trembled. For the first time, I saw fear in her, not of me, but of losing control, of herself. Mom, I whispered, tears stinging. I just want you back. She turned her face away. Back is gone, she murmured. Only forward. Only God. The end came sudden, violent, inevitable. One night her screams jolted the neighbors awake. They called the police. By the time the officers broke down the door, she was hurling dishes at shadows only she could see. Her voice was raw from shouting about demons crawling through the walls. I stood frozen in the corner as they restrained her. She clawed at them, snarling prayers. Her face twisted into something I barely recognized. For a moment our eyes met. There was no hate, no recognition, just a vast, hollow emptiness that shattered me more than any slap ever had. They took her to a psychiatric facility under an emergency order. The medication quieted her storms, softened her edges. The doctors said she might recover in time. But I knew there was no going back. I visited sometimes. She'd smile, calm, polite, almost normal. But every time I saw it, I waited for that smile to crack, for the madness to peek through again. I left Aberdeen for university with scars no one could see. On the outside, I seemed fine. But at night, I still heard footsteps in empty halls, locks clicking, prayers whispered through the dark. I remembered the woman who baked bread, the woman with wild eyes. And I understood. Love can twist, safety can rot, and family can betray. Madness doesn't always come from the dark outside. Sometimes it grows quietly inside the people we trust most. Appearances deceive. Silence can destroy, and survival sometimes means letting go of the ones you ache to save. Trust is sacred, but it should never blind you to danger, even when it wears the face of home. I used to believe my mother was the strongest woman in the world. Caroline Turner wasn't like the other moms in Portland, Maine. She didn't pack tidy lunches with handwritten notes or spend Saturday mornings at bake sales. She wasn't steady like that. She was more like the ocean that crashed against the rocky shore near our house, beautiful, wild, and unpredictable. Before I was born, she'd been a singer at a smoky bar downtown. Her voice husky, her dresses tight, her lipstick always a little too red. She told me she gave it all up when my father left, said raising me was her greatest performance. It's just you and me, Soph, she'd whisper, pulling me close, her perfume sharp and sweet. No one else matters. I didn't understand then that sometimes she meant it as love, and sometimes as a warning. By the time I was 11, I had learned to watch her moods like weather patterns. If her smile was too wide, if her eyes darted too quickly, if she started humming those old songs under her breath, I knew a storm was coming. One wrong word and she'd snap. Not always with her hands. Sometimes her voice was enough. Ungrateful, she'd hiss. Don't make me regret giving up everything for you. That rainy October night in 2005, I sat in the back seat of her Buick, tapping my sneakers against the floorboard. The car smelled faintly of cigarettes, though she always swore she'd quit. The wipers screeched across the glass, fighting the downpour. We'd pulled into a dying strip mall, half the stores boarded up, a single streetlight buzzing above the ATM. Mom grabbed her purse and stepped out into the rain. I watched her, half afraid she'd just disappear into it. That's when I saw him. A man standing near the alley, hood pulled low, shoulders hunched. He wasn't loitering. He was watching. "Mom," I whispered, leaning forward, tugging her sleeve before she opened the door. "He's staring at you." She laughed softly, the way she did when she wanted to erase my fear. "Don't be silly, Sophie. People look. That's what they do." But my stomach nodded. His eyes were sharp, darting. The air felt heavier. She strode toward the ATM unbothered while I pressed my face to the window, heart pounding. Then it happened, so fast it felt like a dream I'd already had. The man lunged, slamming her against the concrete, yanking her purse. Her scream was swallowed by the storm. I stumbled out of the car, yelling, "Leave her alone!" He turned on me, his rough hands gripping my shoulders. "Shut up or she dies," he growled. I froze. My body trembled, tears blurring my vision. Before he could drag me farther, my mother erupted. Not with fear, but something feral. She clawed at his arm, shrieking, "Don't touch what's mine!" He flinched, startled by her fury, and bolted into the rain, vanishing down the alley. Mom collapsed onto the wet pavement, breathing hard, her eyes burning with something that scared me even more than the man had. People ran over. Someone wrapped a blanket around me. Someone called 911. But when the police arrived, Mom's words tumbled out in frantic bursts, accusing them of being in on it, accusing me of unlocking the door. Her voice shook, her thoughts tangled. She looked at me like I was part of the threat. That night, I stopped believing my mother was the strongest woman in the world. That night, I started wondering if she was the most dangerous. The days after blurred together. Everyone at school asked what happened. I gave them the short version. Some guy tried to rob us, but we're fine now. The truth was too heavy. Mom wasn't fine. She stopped sleeping, pacing the house all night, peeking through the blinds every few minutes. Then came the locks, padlocks on every door. One for the basement, one on my bedroom door. "Just in case," she said with a thin smile. Next came the mirrors. She covered them with sheets, muttering about eyes watching from the glass. Once I tried to uncover the bathroom mirror to brush my hair. She caught me. Her fingers clamped my wrists so hard her nails left crescents in my skin. "Do you want them to see us?" she hissed. I didn't ask who they were. I knew better. Then came the drills. Safety drills, she called them, pretending it was a game. She'd shove me into the closet, padlock it, and tell me to stay silent until she opened it again. Sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. I'd sit in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, biting my sleeve to muffle my sobs. "Better you hate me now than get taken later," she'd say when she finally let me out. At school, I jumped at footsteps in the hall, flinched at raised voices. Friends stopped calling. One afternoon, my teacher noticed the bruises on my wrist. I mumbled something about tripping, but she didn't buy it. The next week, social services came. I remember the day they took me like it was yesterday. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard came into the classroom. She knelt beside my desk and whispered, "Sophie, we're going to take a little trip." My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, to cling to the desk to make her leave me there. But something inside me also exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. They brought me to a foster family, the Millers. Their house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent. They gave me a soft bed, tucked me in with a quilt, and asked what my favorite breakfast was. For the first time in so long, warmth didn't come with strings attached. But peace never lasted where my mom was concerned. She fought in court, sobbing on the witness stand, telling the judge how much she loved me. She painted herself as a victim of trauma, a mother who'd only tried to protect her daughter from a cruel world. After therapy and medication, they granted her supervised visits. We sat across from each other in sterile rooms that smelled of disinfectant. Her smile stretched too wide. "You know they can't keep us apart forever," she whispered once, eyes gleaming. "It's you and me, Soph, always." I nodded because that's what she needed. But inside I was beginning to understand. Sometimes the person you're supposed to run to is the one you need to escape from. The visits started once a week. Mom would show up with cookies she swore she'd baked, though they were clearly store-bought. She'd hug me too tightly, her perfume clinging to my clothes. "Don't listen to them," she'd whisper. "They just want to keep us apart." The supervisors smiled politely, never noticing the sharpness in her words, the way her hands trembled. To them, she was just a heartbroken mother. To me, she was a storm waiting to break. One afternoon during a visit, she leaned close and murmured, "You think they'll protect you? They can't, no one can. It's only me." I stared at the table, tracing the scratches in the wood, pretending not to hear. Her hand slammed down, the sound cracking through the room. The supervisor jumped. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," she snapped, then forced a smile. "Sorry, I miss her so much." I knew the act by heart. At the Millers, I tried to fit into normal life. Mrs. Miller taught me how to bake banana bread, laughing when I spilled flour. Mr. Miller held the back of my bike seat until I stopped wobbling. Their daughter Claire invited me to sleepovers, painted my nails, braided my hair. For a while I let myself believe I belonged there, but my mom's shadow always followed. One night the phone rang. Mrs. Miller answered, her brow furrowed. She handed it to me gently. "It's your mom." My hand shook as I pressed the receiver to my ear. "Hi," I whispered. "They can't keep you forever," she said, voice low and urgent. "Pack a bag. I'll come get you." "I can't," I whispered. Her breath hitched, then turned sharp. "Ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, you'd rather live with strangers than your own mother?" I hung up. Tears burned my eyes. Mrs. Miller wrapped her arms around me, but guilt pressed down like a weight. I loved my mother. I was terrified of her. At school, I started therapy. The counselor asked me to draw how I felt. I drew a house with padlocks on every door. "Who's inside?" she asked softly. "Me," I whispered. Her eyes softened. "Do you want to get out?" I didn't answer. I didn't know if I could. The older I got, the sharper the memories became. That night at the ATM played over and over, not the man, but my mother's face. The wildness in her eyes, the way she screamed, not in fear but fury. I realized the real terror hadn't come from outside. It had always lived inside her. Even as a teenager, she haunted me. She sent letters from therapy, each one swinging between love and accusation. "I'm proud of you, Soph," one would say, followed by, "Don't let them poison you against me." I'd tear them up, but her words stayed like splinters under my skin. When I turned 16, the court gave me a choice: stay with the Millers permanently or try reunification with my mom. I didn't hesitate. I chose the Millers. Mom screamed in the courtroom, her voice echoing. "She's mine! You can't steal her!" The gavel struck, but her words stayed in my head for years. I graduated, went to college out of state, tried to build a normal life. But fear lingered. I flinched in parking lots, double-checked my locks, avoided mirrors at night. When friends asked, "Why are you so jumpy?" I just shrugged. How could I tell them that my mother's love felt like a cage? Now as an adult, I see it clearly. My mother wasn't a monster, not always. She tucked me in at night, sang lullabies, brushed my hair when I was sick. But love twisted by paranoia and control becomes something else. Sometimes I visit Portland, though I don't see her. She's older now, quieter, the fire dimmed by years of medication. I hear she lives in a group home, still muttering about conspiracies. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of me, if she regrets the storm she brought into my childhood. I'll never know. But I do know this. The night of the mugging, when she screamed like an animal and saved me, was also the night she showed me the truth. The danger wasn't strangers in alleys. It was trusting someone who couldn't tell where love ended and control began. Fear doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it lives in the people we love most. Trust has to be earned, not demanded. And no matter how deep the bond of blood runs, it's never wrong to walk away when love becomes a prison. I remember the first time I realized my life wasn't normal, though back then I thought it was. I was 8 years old, standing on a narrow stage somewhere in Los Angeles. The spotlights were so bright they made the sweat on my forehead shimmer like tiny diamonds. My chest rose and fell too fast. The crowd wasn't cheering for me, they were cheering for her dream. Veronica Weiss, my mother, had once been an actress, a Hollywood hopeful with 2 high heels and 2 enormous ambitions, but the industry had spat her out. leaving her with little more than bitterness and a burning promise. If she couldn't shine, then I would. "Lift your chin, Clara," she hissed from the front row, her voice slicing through the music like a blade. "Do you want to look like a rag doll again?" My smile tightened. I tried. I forced my lips into a grin that felt more like a scream. My body trembled from exhaustion, my sequined dress pinching at places I didn't even know could hurt. To the audience, I looked like a confident little girl twirling under the lights. But inside, I felt like a marionette, pulled by invisible strings dancing inside a cage I didn't understand. My father had left years before. Mom said he was weak. "He didn't believe in your talent," she told me with a mixture of disgust and pity. When I was 6, I thought he was a coward. By 8, I realized he'd just escaped first. Home wasn't really home. It was a fortress built from her rules and my fear. Mirrors covered every wall so I could see my progress. Shoes had to be worn even when my feet throbbed. Meals were weighed to the calorie. I wasn't allowed to slouch, frown, or even breathe wrong. "Pain makes you perfect," she'd snap if I winced. "Stars don't get messy, Clara. They shine." She paced behind me during practice, correcting every motion, posture, smile, even the rhythm of my breathing. At night, she'd stand behind me as I brushed my hair, her reflection towering over mine in the mirror. "Remember, they're always watching," she'd whisper. I learned quickly that dreams were dangerous. When she found the notebook I kept hidden under my bed, filled with sketches of buildings, bridges, and quiet places where no one clapped, she tore it apart. "Stop wasting time with childish fantasies," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You were born to be seen, not to build." I told myself someday she'd see me for who I was, not what she wanted me to be. But hope was just another performance. By the time I turned 12, my childhood had been carved away, piece by piece. Birthdays were replaced with rehearsals. Sleepovers were distractions. Cake was poison. Every night I'd lie in bed listening to the sound of her typing, fast, frantic on her laptop, or muttering to herself in the kitchen. I never moved. I never coughed. Even the floorboards learned to hold their breath. One afternoon at school, a classmate named Lila asked, "Hey, Clara, you want to come to the movies this weekend?" Her voice was casual, kind. I froze, my throat tightened. I didn't know how to say yes without inviting hell. I have homework," I stammered, eyes dropping to the floor. "Oh," she said, frowning. "Maybe next time?" I nodded, but there was never a next time. That night, Mom stared at me across the dinner table, eyes narrow, smile fixed. "You smiled too long at the wrong person today," she said softly, brushing her fingers along my cheek like a surgeon examining a wound. "Remember, every gesture counts. Every flaw is a disaster waiting to happen." I hated her for it sometimes. Other times I hated myself for being too weak to stop her. She had built her life around my performance and mine around her approval. I didn't want to be a model. I wanted to be an architect, to design something that stood still and silent, not something that had to sparkle on command. But in our world, silence was failure and applause was oxygen. The competitions began to feel like battlefields. Every time I stepped onto a stage, I could hear her voice whispering inside my head. Sharp and relentless, smile wider. "Clara, don't disappoint me." The applause always came, but it never felt like victory. Each round of cheers sounded like nails against a coffin lid. Every trophy she placed on the shelf felt heavier than the last, and every smile I gave the world felt like another piece of me being buried alive. At 14, everything got worse. The regional competitions were brutal. Long rehearsals, endless posing, forced smiles until my cheeks ached. My days were a blur of calorie counts, mirror drills, and Mom's voice drilling into my skull like a metronome. Again, shoulders back. Smile softer. No, not like that. She was everywhere, counting every step, every breath, every word that came out of my mouth. Then came Malene. She was everything Mom wanted me to be. Graceful, confident, dazzling under the lights. She didn't flinch when the judges stared. She didn't tremble. She sparkled. I lost to her that day. Backstage, mascara burning my eyes, I whispered, "Maybe I'm just not good enough." Mom knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around my trembling shoulders. "You are good enough," she murmured into my hair. "Don't forget that, Clara, we're unstoppable." Her voice was soft, almost tender, but something in her tone felt like a warning. The next morning, everything changed. Malene collapsed in her hotel room. Dead. Rumors spread fast, whispers of poison, jealousy, sabotage. I remember sitting on the hotel bed, my stomach hollow, while sunlight spilled through the curtains, slicing the room in gold and shadow. That's when I saw it, the small vial in Mom's open purse. Crushed white pills glittered faintly under the light. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "What did you do?" She didn't even blink. She just smiled, calm and terrifyingly certain. "I removed the obstacle. One day you'll thank me." My throat closed. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell someone, but all I could do was stare. Every trophy, every smile, every ounce of applause suddenly felt soaked in blood. After that, I tried to tell people. A teacher, a social worker, even a judge once during a custody check. But Mom was brilliant. She could cry on cue, twist words into ribbons of pity. "She's just under pressure," she'd say, brushing my hair like I was a porcelain doll. "I'm doing everything I can for her. You know how competitive the industry is." They always believed her. Everyone did. Behind closed doors, I grew smaller. She never hit me. She didn't have to. Her voice did the damage, sharp, cold, relentless. I stopped eating. I stopped looking at myself. At night, she'd sit at the foot of my bed, stroking my ankle with her long, cold fingers. "We're unstoppable," she'd whisper. "You and I, don't betray me." I would nod, eyes wide open, too terrified to move. I learned early that survival meant silence. Even school felt like another stage. Teachers commented on my discipline, my dedication. They didn't see the tremor in my hands or the way my smile cracked under fluorescent lights. My classmates invited me out, ice cream, birthdays, study groups, but I always said no. "I have practice. My mom's waiting. Maybe next time." There was never a next time. The cage wasn't made of bars. It was made of expectations. Invisible but unbreakable. Years passed before I finally found a way out. At 18, I got a scholarship for architecture. A miracle, really, and used it like a lifeline. I packed a single suitcase and left before dawn. Mom's calls came daily at first. "Don't forget who made you," she'd sneer when I didn't answer right away. "You're nothing without me." I blocked her number, deleted her messages. I left the mirror-lined apartment behind and never looked back. College was the first place that felt real. I could breathe there. I could draw again. I'd sit by the studio window sketching buildings with open spaces and sunlight streaming through wide, clean glass. No reflections, no watchers. Just air and light. Still, the ghosts lingered. Loud applause makes me flinch. A voice behind me, especially a woman's, can make my chest tighten. When someone says perfect, my pulse stutters. But I've learned. I've healed mostly. I built a life that belongs to me. I found therapy, real friends, a sense of safety I never knew existed. I learned that ambition without love is just cruelty dressed in glitter. My mother's obsession nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me something precious. How to build, not perform. How to stand in light without being consumed by it. Ambition should never demand your soul. Love should never feel like a leash. And no amount of applause, no trophy, no title in the world is worth the quiet death of a child's spirit. My name is Samantha Dio, and I grew up in a weathered colonial house at 12 Bramblewood Lane in Ashford, Maine, where the scent of polished mahogany always tangled with the sharp breath of sea salt from the bay. The floors creaked like old bones, and the windows whistled when the wind turned from the shore. My mother, Evelyn, was the kind of woman people admired without ever really knowing. She ran an antique shop downtown, Evelyn's Finds, and everyone in town praised her taste, her grace, her impossible ability to turn decay into beauty. But what they didn't see was the precision behind her charm. She lived by rules, by labels, by control. Every inch of our house was her reflection, tidy, deliberate, staged. And over time, I realized so was I. When I was 12, I started noticing the pattern. She labeled everything, everything. Drawers, pantry shelves, even the sugar jar. My notebooks had colored tabs she'd made herself. Math, science, chores, behavior. She said it helped keep the chaos out. At first, I thought it was harmless. I'd laugh when she caught me rolling my eyes. "Someday you'll thank me, Sam," she'd say with that practiced smile. Order keeps us safe. But at night, the house didn't feel safe. I'd lie awake listening to faint movements, floorboards groaning under invisible weight, something dragging, a whisper that slid through the walls like a sigh. It always came from the locked room on the second floor, the one I wasn't allowed to enter. Whenever I asked about it, Mom would barely look up from her tea. "The wind, Samantha," she'd say lightly. "Old houses settle, that's all." I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But that door, it felt alive, like it was listening. So I started paying closer attention. A vase would move slightly to the left. My school notes, gone from my desk one day, returned the next with a faint coffee stain, photos on the hallway wall that seemed to shift angles overnight, as though someone had been staring too long and forgot where they'd been placed. It was subtle at first, but I began to feel something off, like my life was being curated. During the day, I played my part. I joked with friends, smiled in class, nodded when teachers praised my handwriting. But coming home felt like stepping into a stage set built for someone else's performance. Mom always knew where I'd been, what I'd said, even things I hadn't told her. Her voice would float through the house, calm and melodic. "You shouldn't keep secrets from me, sweetheart. Secrets cause clutter. Clutter. That was her word for everything she couldn't control. By the time I turned 14, the air between us was suffocating. I hid my diary in the lining of my backpack. I whispered to myself only in the shower, where the sound of running water might drown me out. I stopped locking the bathroom door because she'd just find a reason to remove it. Every small act of rebellion, writing a private thought, leaving a cup in the sink, became a quiet war. And she always won. Until one rainy Thursday. The house was still, the sky a bruise-colored haze pressing against the windows. Mom had gone to the antique fair in Portland. I stood in the hallway staring at the locked room's door, its brass handle catching a dull glint of light. The air felt colder there, like the walls exhaled. My heart hammered as I reached into the drawer by the stairs, where Mom kept the keys in a neat labeled tray. Attic, basement, office, second room. The brass key was heavier than I expected. My fingers trembled as I fitted into the lock. Click. The sound echoed through the hallway like a verdict. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit me first, dust, paper, a faint sweetness like decayed flowers. The curtains were drawn, letting in only a thin gray light. Inside, everything was terrifyingly tidy. Shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, hundreds of them, stacked and labeled in my mother's delicate script. Samantha, age 5. Samantha, school year. 7. Samantha, social behavior. Summer. My stomach turned. I picked one up, the leather cover soft from use. When I opened it, my name stared back at me in her handwriting. Every page was filled with entries. Conversations, incidents, dates, every moment of my life documented in obsessive, minute detail. Samantha lied about finishing homework. Confronted her gently. Tears followed. Samantha looked distracted today, possible defiance. Samantha spoke with Mrs. Klein after class. Investigate why. Some pages described things that never happened. Memories she'd rewritten. Events twisted until they felt like something out of her imagination. She'd even recorded moments I didn't remember living. I snapped the journal shut, hands shaking, but curiosity isn't something you can bury once it's awake. From that day, I started watching her instead. How she'd move through the house, rearranging objects by millimeters. How she'd glance at my phone, then later act as if she already knew what I'd texted. How emails disappeared. She wasn't just controlling the house, she was controlling the narrative. And somewhere deep down, I began to understand. My mother wasn't preserving order. She was rewriting reality. One labeled drawer. One altered memory, one falsified journal at a time. I felt like I was living inside a maze made of mirrors. Every reflection slightly off. Every memory warped just enough to make me question myself. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I'd walk through the halls of that house and feel as though even the air had been edited. My own life no longer belonged to me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a late winter night. The wind outside was rattling the windows and the old pipes hissed like the house was whispering secrets. Mom sat at the kitchen table, tea steaming beside her. Her hands folded neatly, nails painted the color of bone. I stood across from her, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision shake. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking despite the effort to steady it. "Why are you rewriting everything? Why do you do this?" She looked up at me slowly, like she'd been expecting the question for years. Her eyes softened. "To protect you, darling," she said gently. "To keep our world safe." I swallowed hard. Safe from what? From chaos. From pain. Her tone was serene, her smile faint. "Some people can't handle the truth, Samantha. The truth is cruel. I just make it kinder." Her words were supposed to sound like love, but they landed like ice. I stood there watching her sip her tea, steady and graceful as if she hadn't just confessed to rewriting my entire life. That night, something inside me cracked. The person I had trusted most, the one who'd taught me how to tie my shoes, how to smile for the camera, how to keep order, had also been the architect of my confusion. From then on, I started documenting everything. I kept a small notebook hidden beneath a loose floorboard in my room. Every night I'd write down every detail of the day, the exact words spoken, the expressions on faces, even the weather. I recorded voice memos on my phone labeled with dates and times. I became my own archivist, desperate to preserve something untouched by her hands. Every interaction became a test. When she'd say, "You didn't tell me about that test," I'd flip through my notes later to prove that I had. When she'd insist, "You were angry with me yesterday," I'd listen back to the recording and hear only calm. But even with evidence, doubt crept in. What if I was the one remembering wrong? What if I was the one twisting things? That's how it worked. Her control didn't need chains. It used uncertainty. Sleep became rare. Every creak of the floorboards felt like her footsteps. Every whisper of wind outside the window felt like her voice. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was standing just outside my door, rewriting my night in her mind. High school became my only escape, a strange blend of freedom and paranoia. Between classes and after-school clubs, I felt almost normal. I worked part-time at a bookstore, stacking shelves just to feel like I had some say over what stayed where. But even then, I'd catch myself checking. Had anyone moved my things? Had anyone rewritten my day? I became hyper-aware, trained to observe every flicker of change. My survival depended on it. Eventually, I realized there was only one way out: leaving. When I got accepted to a college 2 states away, I told her with a trembling smile. She nodded, lips pressed tight as though she already knew. "It's good to see you taking initiative," she said softly. "You'll need that skill when you're on your own." The first night in my dorm, I sat on the bare mattress surrounded by unpacked boxes, the fluorescent light humming faintly. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling observed. I unpacked books, arranged them how I wanted, and left a cup on the desk overnight just to see it still there in the morning. It was freedom. And it was terrifying. The silence felt wrong at first, like something was missing. But slowly I began to realize what that something was. Her control. The air felt different without it, heavier but more honest. I could walk out without explaining myself, laugh without documenting the moment, exist without an audience. Still, the ghosts of Bramblewood Lane followed me. The locked room, the scent of polished wood and paper, the rows of journals, each one a distorted reflection of me. Sometimes, even now, years later, I'll hear a floorboard creak in my apartment and my stomach will tighten before I remind myself I'm alone. Certain sounds, rustling paper, the soft click of a lock send a jolt through me. But I've learned to live with that. It's part of the residue, the scar tissue left behind by her obsession. I've learned to rebuild trust, though carefully. I listen more than I speak. I watch people's eyes, their tone, the rhythm of their words. I let trust earn its place, not assume it. The world beyond that house is vast and messy and unpredictable, but it's real. And I've learned that reality, even when it hurts, is better than a beautiful lie. Leaving wasn't just about moving away. It was about reclaiming my own mind, the right to remember, to believe, to be wrong, to be real. Now when I look back, I understand the difference between protection and control, between care and possession. What she called love was really fear. Fear of losing grip, fear of chaos, fear of truth. Freedom, I've realized, isn't the absence of walls. It's the ability to trust the world without someone else scripting it for you. And the most haunting part? Sometimes I still write things down, not because I'm afraid she'll change them, but because I need to prove to myself that I'm the one holding the pen now. I'd always known my mother was intense, but I never understood that intense could also mean terrifying. My name is Vivian Cole, and I was 17 then, living in a weathered Victorian house on Maple Hollow Road, up in the gray quiet of Vermont. The kind of place that always smelled faintly of wood polish and cold air. My mother, Eleanor Cole, was known in town for her composure. People said she was elegant, even otherworldly. They didn't see what I saw. The way her reflection lingered in the mirror after she turned away. The way her hands trembled when a picture frame sat half an inch crooked. She had a ritualistic sort of perfection about her. Hair in tight curls, nails always spotless. She would rearrange furniture for hours, scrubbing and polishing until the whole house felt sterile, like it was afraid to breathe wrong around her. Sometimes I'd find her whispering while she cleaned the basement, her lips moving in tiny secret prayers. When I asked what she was saying, she'd just smile faintly and say, "Just talking to the dust." I told myself it was harmless, that every family had their quirks, that the unease that pressed into my ribs whenever I watched her wasn't fear, just misunderstanding. But deep down I knew something was wrong. It was February 2018. Snowflakes floated like ash through the air, spinning down onto the old iron fence outside. I had just returned from a weekend at my dad's cabin, a small reprieve from the tension that lived in our walls. When I stepped out of the taxi and trudged up the drive with my backpack slung over one shoulder, I noticed the house looked stiller than usual. The curtains drawn, no light seeping through. "Mom," I called as I opened the door. The air smelled faintly of bleach. Nothing. I hung my coat by the door and took a few careful steps inside. Then I heard it, a thud, faint but rhythmic, coming from below. My stomach tightened. "Mom," I called again, louder this time. Silence except for that sound. Soft, uneven, like something shifting against wood. I moved toward the basement door. The old railing felt cold under my hand. Every step creaked like the house wanted to warn me away. The door itself was heavy, fitted with an old brass lock that usually rattled. Today, it didn't. It sat perfectly still, like it had been waiting. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. My fingers trembled as I turned the knob. It gave with a low groan. The smell hit first, metallic, raw, and sharp. Then my flashlight beam landed on her. A girl, maybe my age, maybe younger, was strapped to a metal table bolted into the floor. Her wrists were bound with leather. Her hair matted to her face with sweat and blood. Her eyes were open, wide, pleading, and standing over her was my mother. A scalpel glinted in her hand. She was humming softly, a tune I recognized, one she used to hum while brushing my hair when I was a kid. "Mom," my voice broke. "What are you doing?" She turned slowly. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked calm, gentle even. "Shh," she whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. "She's just part of the collection." I froze. The word echoed in my skull. Collection. There was a story that floated around Maple Hollow, about a woman who collected people, bodies found without eyes, families disappearing. I'd laughed it off before. Everyone had, but now I could barely breathe. The woman who'd tucked me in at night, who braided my hair and told me never to go into the woods alone. She was standing there, covered in someone else's blood. I stumbled backward, knocking into a stack of boxes. "Mom, please stop," I whispered, my throat dry. Her eyes softened in that awful motherly way. "You shouldn't have come home early, sweetheart," she murmured. "It isn't ready yet." I ran. I don't remember the stairs, only the way my heartbeat filled my ears like thunder. That night, I locked myself in my room and stared at the ceiling until morning. Every sound in the house made me flinch. The pipes, the wind, her footsteps pacing downstairs. But I didn't call the police. I couldn't. My little brother Nathan still adored her and still kissed her cheek goodnight and believed every word she said. If I told anyone, if she found out, he'd be next. So I smiled. I pretended. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had happened. I joked about recipes, asked about groceries, sat across from her at dinner. I even laughed when she teased me about my messy hair. My hands shook under the table, nails cutting into my palms to keep me from crying. I watched her carefully. When she left for errands, when she disappeared into the basement, When she hummed under her breath while washing dishes, the same song. Always the same. She was flawless on the outside. The perfect neighbor, the perfect mother. But every smile she gave now felt like a threat wrapped in warmth. Late one night, when the house went still and her door creaked closed, I crept downstairs. The flashlight trembled in my grip. The basement smelled like something had died there long ago. My feet stuck slightly to the floor as I stepped over dried streaks of red. I moved toward the far wall where the concrete looked uneven. I pressed my hand against it. Hollow. A false wall. My pulse roared in my ears as I pried it open. Behind it sat shelves lined with glass jars. Neat, orderly, labeled in her delicate handwriting. Inside each jar floated a single eye, milky and preserved in cloudy liquid. Each had a date. Each had a name, and one of the labels read, Vivian Reserved. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. The truth slammed into me like a hammer. My mother wasn't just strange or obsessive or off. She was the one. The stories, the whispers, the missing girls, and every single one of them traced back here. To her, to this house, to my mother, the collector. I backed away from the hidden wall, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The jars gleamed dully under the beam. Hundreds of eyes, some clouded with age, some so fresh they seemed to follow me. I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. She was too calm, too clever, too used to control. If I said one wrong word, she'd turn it on me. I had to be smarter. I had to plan. And I had to save that girl. Over the next few days, I lived two lives. The obedient daughter and the desperate survivor. I laughed when she spoke to me, helped her fold laundry, even listened as she chatted about recipes. But every moment alone I prepared. I hid small doses of sedatives in my desk drawer, studied the locks, memorized every inch of the basement and its escape routes. I left subtle hints in conversations with people I trusted. My art teacher, Mrs. Jenkins across the street, never enough to alert Mom, but enough that if I disappeared, someone might notice. The storm came on a Thursday night. Thick snow pelted the windows, turning the world outside into a blur of white. The wind howled, drowning out all other sounds. It was the only night I could move without her hearing every floorboard creak. I took a slow breath and called up the stairs. Mom, there's a leak in the attic. I think something's dripping near the vent. She appeared in the hallway, elegant as ever, her silk robe brushing the floor. A leak in this weather? She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Then she smiled, that serene, chilling smile. Let's have a look, sweetheart. I followed her up, the stairs narrowing, each step pressing the air from my lungs. I could smell her perfume, lavender and bleach. My hands trembled as I held the flashlight. The small bottle of sedative in my pocket clinked softly. When she bent to inspect the supposed leak, I unscrewed the cap. My voice came out too calm, too rehearsed. You think we'll need to replace the insulation? She chuckled. Maybe. Though you really should have called me sooner. I know, I murmured, pouring the liquid carefully onto the rim of her tea mug from earlier. I just didn't want to bother you. Minutes passed. She took a sip, then another. I waited until her eyes fluttered and her movement slowed. Mom, I said softly, moving closer. You okay? Her hand slipped from the mug. Just a bit dizzy, she whispered. I know. I caught her gently, lowering her to the floor. My heart thundered so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. I grabbed the rope I'd hidden under the loose attic board and secured her wrists, whispering apologies the whole time. I'm sorry, Mom. Then I ran. Downstairs, through the kitchen, grabbing the phone. 911, I gasped. It's my mother. She's hurt someone. There's a girl in the basement. Please hurry. My voice cracked as I gave our address. The operator tried to keep me calm, but I couldn't stop pacing, watching the attic door, half afraid she'd come down smiling again. When the police arrived, red and blue lights flashing against the snow, I felt my knees give out. They rushed inside. For a moment, I thought it was over. It wasn't. Mom didn't scream, didn't plead. She smiled, the same quiet smile she always wore when someone complimented her roses. You're overreacting, she told the officers in that melodic voice. My daughter's always been imaginative, but when they opened the basement, when the flashlight beams fell on the jars and the stains, the lies collapsed. I'll never forget the moment her face changed, that flicker of realization that it was over. The calm drained out of her, replaced by something feral, almost inhuman. She screamed then, not out of guilt, but rage. They dragged her out in cuffs, still cursing softly, still smiling between her teeth. After the arrest, our house became a crime scene. They sealed the doors with yellow tape and carried the evidence out in boxes. Jars, tools, names on labels. The town was in shock. Families finally got answers. Horrific, incomplete answers. To disappearances they'd mourned for years. Nathan refused to believe it. My little brother sobbed for days, insisting she was framed, that I was lying. "She loved us, Viv," he screamed once. "She loved us." I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a child that love and monstrosity can live in the same body? Therapists tried to help. They told me to process it, to forgive the past. But forgiveness isn't possible when your nightmares still smell like antiseptic and blood. For months, I couldn't sleep without hearing that faint humming from the basement. Couldn't look in mirrors without seeing the reflection of her eyes instead of mine. Time passed, but the fear never truly left. Even now, years later, I walk through empty streets and feel it. That prickle at the back of my neck, that sense that someone is watching. I catch myself noticing tiny details others ignore. A light left on in an abandoned house, a door ajar where it shouldn't be. But I survived. I made it out. I went to college, made friends, built a new version of myself from the ruins she left behind. People see me smile now and they think I'm strong. Maybe I am. But I know what real strength costs. I've learned that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears perfume. Sometimes it cooks you breakfast and kisses your forehead goodnight. Sometimes it raises you. I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting through it even when your hands shake. It's calling for help when your voice feels like it's breaking. It's saving someone else even when part of you still loves the monster. Because sometimes the person meant to protect you is the one you must protect the world from. Appearances deceive. Evil smiles. But vigilance and courage are the only shields we have. I grew up in a house where order mattered more than love. At least that's how it always felt. My first memory isn't laughter or warmth. It's the sound of my mother's pen tapping against her clipboard as she watched me chew. 20 times, she'd say. Not 19, not 21. Even swallowing was governed by precision. It was Dublin, 2011. I was 11 years old. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My dad worked long shifts at the printing press, steady, quiet, almost invisible. My little sister, Maya, had my same dark hair and wide brown eyes, though hers always seemed to hold more fear than wonder. And my mother, Rowena, kept the house spotless. Curtains perfectly pressed, grass trimmed short. Dinner plates lined like soldiers in the cabinet. The neighbors smiled when they passed. "Oh, the Bennetts are such a neat family," they'd say. If only they knew. Mom had once been a teacher at a private school. Everyone said she was brilliant, strict but fair. But that wasn't what the parents thought. Too many children came home crying. Too many complaints about her methods. When the school let her go, something inside her fractured. Everything she'd once demanded from her students, she now demanded from us, only harsher, sharper, relentless. Dad never stopped her. He'd sit at the kitchen table, eating quietly while she lectured. Sometimes at night, I'd hear him clear his throat like he wanted to say something, but then silence. Always silence. I loved to write. It was my secret escape. I had a small blue notebook hidden under my mattress, filled with stories about heroes, freedom, worlds that didn't exist. If Mom ever found it, she'd call it nonsense. "Stories don't feed families, Lucas," she'd snap. "Discipline does. Remember that." So I wrote in secret, my pencil moving quietly in the dark, words becoming the only air I could breathe. In our house, every moment had a rule. Wake up at 6 sharp, breakfast at 7, shoes lined perfectly by the door. Bathroom breaks were timed. Even brushing teeth had an order. Hair first, then teeth or else. Once Maya forgot. Mom slapped the toothbrush from her hand. "Do it right," she hissed. Maya's lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Crying only made it worse. Some nights I'd lie awake and hear Mom pacing the hallway, whispering to herself, "If I don't keep order, everything falls apart. Everything." Her steps would always pause outside my door. I'd stop breathing until I heard them move again. Even as a kid, I knew something was wrong with her. But when you grow up inside it, wrong starts to feel normal. The punishments began small. Forget to tuck in a chair? 10 minutes standing in the corner. Shoes left out of line? Balance them on your head until your neck burned. One night I went to bed early. I was exhausted from school, too tired to think. But then the door slammed open. Mom stood there, her silhouette cutting through the hallway light. "Do you think you control the schedule now?" she asked. "I'm just tired, Mom," I whispered. "Do you decide bedtime or do I?" "You do." "Exactly. Weakness is failure, and I won't raise a failure." She made me stand on one leg while redoing my homework. She filmed me as I tried to write, my leg trembling so badly that the pencil scratched holes in the paper. Maya tried to sneak in a glass of water. Mom caught her by the wrist. "Don't interfere. Let your brother learn." Her tone was like ice cracking. That night I thought about running away. But where would I go? Dad wasn't home most nights, and Maya was too young to leave behind. So I stayed. At school, I carried her rules with me like invisible chains. I sat perfectly straight, hands folded, never interrupting, never relaxing. Teachers praised me for my discipline, my manners. But inside, I was breaking apart. During group work, my hands would shake if I thought I'd done something wrong. I'd freeze the same way I did at home when Mom's eyes were on me. One afternoon, my English teacher, Mrs. Byrne, asked me to stay after class. "Lucas," she said softly, "you always look so nervous. Is something going on at home?" I forced a smile. "No, ma'am. Everything's fine." But she kept watching me with those kind, patient eyes, and something inside me cracked open. "She makes us follow rules all the time," I whispered. "Even how we chew." Mrs. Byrne leaned forward, her brow softening. "Who does, Lucas?" "My mom." The words felt sharp, dangerous, like saying them out loud could summon her. But once they left my mouth, I couldn't stop. It took weeks before anything happened. Mrs. Byrne must have told someone, because one afternoon, 2 strangers came to school. They had kind faces but serious eyes, and their voices were calm in that practiced, careful way. "We're just here to make sure you're safe, Lucas," one of them said. "Safe?" I echoed. The word felt like something from a storybook. I didn't even know what it meant anymore. At home, Mom seemed to know. She was sharper, watching us constantly. She checked our rooms every night, running her fingers along windowsills for dust, inspecting my fingernails to make sure they were trimmed evenly. One evening, Maya was just humming softly at the dinner table, some song she'd learned at school. "Quiet," Mom snapped, slamming her fork so hard against her plate it cracked. "Meals are for eating, not noise." Maya froze. Her eyes filled, but she didn't dare cry. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Later that night, under the covers, I whispered, "One day it'll be better." "I promise." "How?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but it has to be." The next week, the social workers came to our house. Mom greeted them with that practiced, sugary smile, her hair perfectly set, her tone sweet enough to rot your teeth. She called us her angels and talked about how we loved her schedules. But they weren't fooled. They noticed the charts taped to the fridge, lists of chores, punishments, rules for every hour of the day. They saw her notebooks full of behavior logs. They asked quiet, careful questions. Dad sat in the corner saying nothing, just twisting his wedding ring around his finger. When the social workers finally left, Mom turned to me. Her smile was gone. "Did you tell them?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "Did you betray me?" "No, Mom," I said quickly. I didn't say anything. Her eyes stayed on me, cold, measuring. Then she turned away. That night, she paced the hallway for hours, muttering under her breath. I could hear her through the door. Discipline keeps us safe. Without it, everything falls apart. Then silence. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. I'd left my school bag tilted against the wall instead of perfectly upright. It sounds stupid now, but that was all it took. "You think rules are a joke?" she shouted. "I just forgot," I stammered. "Forgot?" "There is no forgetting!" She yanked the bag, dumping my books across the floor. "Pick them up. Do it again. Do it right." My hands shook as I stacked them, trying to make the corners even. She slapped one out of my hand. The crack of paper and skin made Maya start crying from the doorway. That night I couldn't hold it in anymore. The next day at school I told Mrs. Byrne everything. The punishments, the recordings, the rules, the pacing. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, pale and still. When I finished, her voice trembled slightly. "You did the right thing, Lucas," she said. "We're going to help." A week later they came back, this time with police. Mom tried to fight them. She said she was a loving mother who just wanted disciplined children. But the notebooks, the videos, even the neighbors who admitted they'd heard the shouting, it was too much. They took her away. I thought I'd feel free, but mostly I felt empty. Dad tried. He really did. He let us eat cereal for dinner if we wanted. He didn't care if our shoes were a mess by the door. But the silence in the house was unbearable. I'd sit at the table stiff as ever, waiting for rules that never came. Every tick of the clock made my skin crawl like she was still somewhere nearby watching. Maya adjusted faster. She laughed more, hummed again, sometimes too loud. I envied her for it. For me, the rules never really left. Years later, I became a writer. The dream I'd once hidden under my mattress turned into my life. I filled pages with worlds where kids fought monsters instead of timetables, where freedom was messy and beautiful and loud. People said my stories had structure, control, every word in its place. They had no idea where that came from. Even now, when I sit down to write, I sometimes hear her voice in my head. Not good enough. Not perfect. But I keep writing anyway because surviving her meant finding my own voice, even if hers still echoes. Control without love isn't discipline. It's cruelty. From the outside, order can look beautiful, but from the inside, it's just a cage. I've learned that freedom is messy, imperfect, and terrifying. But it's real. Children don't grow in the shadow of punishment, they grow in the light of compassion. And when love turns into obsession, it isn't love at all. I can't remember the exact moment when my mother's care turned into something else. Maybe it wasn't a moment at all. More like ivy creeping up a wall, so slow and quiet you don't notice until the bricks are gone. When I was little, she tucked me in at night, read me stories, and packed lunches with tiny handwritten notes. But after my dad left when I was 5, the air in the house shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow tightening, like strings being pulled one by one. By the time I was 12 in the fall of 2023, Pinehurst Avenue didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a training camp, and my mother, Margaret, was the commander. I was her only soldier. Everything had a rule. Shoes lined up at the door. Homework checked twice. Dinner at 6 sharp. Lights out at 9. If I forgot one step, the whole house seemed tense, waiting for her voice. One night, I forgot to text her before stopping by my friend's house after school. We were just playing video games, laughing, losing track of time. I didn't think a quick message would matter. But at 7 on the dot, there she was, standing in the doorway, pale-faced and shaking with quiet fury. "Caleb," she said, her voice low but sharp as glass. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" I stammered. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'll come home now." Her expression didn't soften. She turned and walked ahead of me, silent all the way home. My stomach twisted with dread. When we got back, she locked my bedroom door from the outside. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, steady and precise like a metronome ticking out my punishment. I called out at first, my voice cracking in the dark, but she didn't answer. Hours passed before the lock clicked open again. She didn't yell. She never really did. Somehow that made it worse. "You must learn responsibility," she said evenly. "You can't be trusted if you don't follow rules." Then silence, thick, suffocating silence. I sat on the bed, staring at the floor, unsure if I was angry, ashamed, or both. That night, something inside me shifted. I began thinking of the house as a cage. Not one with bars, but invisible walls that seemed to close in a little tighter every day. Soon it wasn't just curfews or forgotten texts. She started checking everything, my messages, my email, even the photos on my tablet. She kept a small notebook where she wrote down my comings and goings, the exact times I left for school and when I returned. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that she was just scared because Dad wasn't around. But then she installed a camera in the living room. "So I can make sure you're safe when I'm at work," she said. But it didn't feel like safety. It felt like surveillance. Even when she wasn't home, I could feel her eyes on me through that little black lens. Friends stopped coming over. One afternoon, my friend Jacob showed up with his skateboard. We were sitting in the driveway when Mom came outside, clipboard in hand. "Caleb has homework scheduled right now," she said firmly. Jacob froze, looking embarrassed. I mumbled something, an excuse I think, and went back inside. Later that night, she said, "You don't need distractions. Friends will only pull you down." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. Eventually, I found one place she hadn't thought of, the attic. I'd sneak up there with a flashlight and a comic book, hiding between dusty boxes and cobwebs. It was the only place I could breathe. Sometimes I whispered to myself, rehearsing what I'd say if I ever had the courage to talk back. But that didn't last either. One evening, she caught me climbing down the attic ladder. "What were you doing up there?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just looking around." She didn't believe me. The next day, I heard the sound of a new lock clicking into place. School became the only place I felt remotely normal. But even there, I carried her voice inside me. I sat straighter than anyone else, raised my hand for every question, double-checked every answer. Teachers thought I was disciplined. The truth was, I was terrified of mistakes. During group projects, I froze if I thought I might mess up. Once, during a science project, I glued a piece in the wrong spot. My hand started shaking so badly I couldn't fix it. "Hey," my partner Emily whispered. "It's just glue, Caleb. Relax." I wanted to tell her it wasn't about glue, that in my house, mistakes weren't allowed, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. A few days later, Mrs. Turner, my homeroom teacher, pulled me aside. "You're always so tense, Caleb," Mrs. Turner said one afternoon, her brow creased with concern. "Is something going on at home?" I forced a smile, shaking my head. "I'm fine," but I wasn't. Nights were the worst. I'd lie on my back, staring at the ceiling until my eyes blurred, waiting for the sound of her footsteps. Sometimes I heard her whispering outside my door, her voice soft and trembling. "If I don't keep order, everything falls apart." Everything. At first, I tried not to listen. But over time, I began to wonder if maybe she was right. Maybe if I followed every rule perfectly, nothing bad would happen. Maybe I really was the problem. That's how her cage worked. It wasn't built with locks or bars, but with doubt. It made me question my own judgment until her voice sounded more real than mine. Things escalated when she installed another camera, this time in my bedroom. "It's for your safety," she said. "You need supervision to stay on track." I wanted to scream, "That's not safety, that's prison." But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded like I always did, pretending to agree. That night, I hid under my blanket, trying to block out the faint red light glowing from the corner. It pulsed like a heartbeat, reminding me I was never truly alone. A few days later, I left my shoes by the couch instead of the rack by the door. She appeared almost instantly, standing over them like they were evidence of a crime. "Caleb," she said, voice low and even. "What does this say about your respect for order?" I forgot," I murmured. "I'll move them." "Forgotten rules," she replied coldly, "are the same as broken ones." She made me stand in the corner, holding the shoes above my head until my arms trembled and burned. Outside, I could hear Maya, our neighbor's daughter, laughing in her backyard. The sound felt like something from another universe, a place where life was light and unmeasured. That's when I started lying. Little things at first. I told her I had no homework when I did, just so I could sneak into the attic for a few stolen minutes of quiet. I told her my friends were too busy to hang out when the truth was they'd stopped asking. Every lie made me sick with guilt, but it was the only way I could breathe. By then, even silence felt dangerous. I didn't break free all at once. It happened in cracks, small, quiet ones, until the whole wall finally gave way. It was during a math quiz. My pencil slipped from my hand and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and the numbers on the page started swimming. Mrs. Turner rushed to my side, kneeling beside my desk. "Caleb, look at me," she said softly. "You're safe." Safe. The word didn't sound real. Later in her office, I told her everything, the cameras, the rules, the punishments. I waited for her to tell me I was exaggerating, that all moms were strict sometimes, but she didn't. She just nodded and said, "You did the right thing telling me." Social workers came after that. They walked through the house, flipping through her notebooks, asking calm questions that made my stomach twist. Mom smiled through all of it, saying she was just a concerned parent, but they saw enough. I ended up staying with my dad for a while. His apartment was small, messy, alive in a way our old house never was. For the first time, I could breathe. I ate cereal at midnight. I left my shoes in a heap by the door. I stayed up late reading comics without feeling guilty. Still, the cage came with me. I flinched at every sudden noise. I sat at dinner with my back straight, waiting for rules that never came. Even years later, in high school, the fear lingered like a shadow that wouldn't fade. I wanted freedom, but I didn't know how to live inside it. Now, I'm a writer. The stories I once whispered to myself in the attic have become my way out. The words make sense of what didn't. Mom's voice still echoes sometimes, not good enough, not perfect, but I keep writing anyway. Because I've learned something. Love without trust suffocates, and control without compassion turns into cruelty. What my mother called discipline was really fear wearing the mask of care. A child can't grow inside an invisible cage. They only learn to doubt themselves. Freedom, messy, imperfect, unpredictable, is where love actually lives. I used to think my home was normal. Now I know it was a lesson I was never supposed to survive. I used to think my life was normal, or at least as normal as it could be in Burlington, Vermont. My name's Lily Carter, and I was 12 when I first realized that the world outside my house was one I could never really belong to. Mom, Monica, was the center of everything. She had that kind of smile people in the neighborhood envied, the kind that made you believe she was the perfect parent, polite, charming, always knowing the right thing to say. But behind that smile was something that pressed on your lungs until you forgot how to breathe. She grew up alone, I learned later, an only child in a house of rules, where affection was earned, not given. I think she carried that house inside her. To the neighbors, she was devoted. To me, she was every slammed door, every frozen stare, every intercepted phone call. Dad left when I was 6. She told me more than once that she'd saved me from him, from abandonment, from chaos. But what she really saved me from was freedom. Friends are dangerous, she used to say. People change you, Lily. They take pieces of you away. So I learned not to ask. Then came that Friday night when Emily texted me about her birthday sleepover. I remember sitting on my bed, legs crossed, clutching my phone so tight my fingers went numb. Balloons, cake, movies, just a normal night. The thought made my heart flutter, to laugh, to be somewhere I could breathe without permission. But before I could even reply, I heard it, the long, aching creak of the hallway floorboards. Mom didn't knock. She never did. "Who are you texting, Lily?" Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like glass sliding over ice. "Just Emily," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She's having a party." Her eyes flicked from my phone to my face, sharp and measuring. "And you think you're going?" I felt my throat tighten. I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. Her silence filled in everything I didn't say. That night I sat cross-legged on my bed, sketchpad in my lap, the sound of pencil on paper trying to drown out the ache in my chest. I drew faces I'd never seen, girls laughing, running, free. But outside my door, I heard her breathing, slow, steady, listening. I think she liked to remind me she was always there. The first real punishment came the day I mentioned a classmate, just mentioned. I don't remember what I said, only the look on her face. Her eyes like 2 cold pins, her jaw stiff, that voice low and trembling with fury. "You think you can replace me with them?" I didn't answer. I'd already learned that answers weren't required, only obedience. By the time I was 10, she'd drawn up a new constitution for our lives. No sleepovers, no phone calls without her in the room, no letters, no social media. She deleted every app from my phone herself, watching me as she did it, her reflection in the black screen like a judge sealing my sentence. Every attempt I made to reach out, to anyone, ended the same way, her standing behind me as I wrote pages of apologies, 10 pages of confessions, 10 pages of promises that I'd never betray her again. She'd pace behind me, hands folded, eyes fixed on the back of my neck. Slower, she'd say. Mean it this time. School was the only place I could pretend to exist. I'd draw during recess and faces of kids laughing, whispering, sharing secrets. I'd watch their shadows stretch across the playground and imagine stepping into them, blending in. But even there, I could feel her. Every time the bell rang, every time my teacher said my name, it was like Mom's eyes were watching through the walls. The first time I tried to sneak out, I didn't even make it to the sidewalk. She was waiting at the end of the hall, her silhouette framed in the porch light. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She just grabbed my wrist and pulled me inside. Her breath brushed my ear as she leaned in close. "Every time you look at them," she whispered, "you're telling me I'm not enough. Don't you ever forget who saved you, Lily? Who stayed when your father didn't?" Her fingers loosened, but the words didn't. They stayed, like fingerprints on glass, impossible to wipe away. I learned early that freedom was a lie. Laughter, curiosity, even joy, all of it carried consequences. By 12, I had built my own quiet rebellion. Whispered phone calls in the bathroom, a notebook hidden behind my dresser, sketches that said what I couldn't. Each page was a secret escape, each drawing a breath I wasn't allowed to take. Emily was my lifeline. The one person who made me feel like I existed beyond the borders of my house. But even her friendship had to be hidden like contraband. I'd delete messages, memorize her words, and pretend I didn't know her when Mom was around. That afternoon, I thought Mom was out running errands. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the wind brushing the window panes. I typed quickly, "Can I come over this weekend?" My heart raced as I hit send. I didn't even hear her come in. "Who are you texting?" I froze. Her reflection appeared in the TV screen before I could answer. "Then no one," I stammered, hiding the phone behind my back. She moved fast, faster than I remembered her ever moving. The phone was out of my hands before I could blink. "You ungrateful little snake," she hissed. Her voice shook, not with volume, but with venom. "I gave you life and you choose them over me?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "I just wanted to go to Emily's," I whispered. I want a friend." Her expression hardened, eyes narrowing like she'd just discovered a betrayal she couldn't forgive. "You don't need friends," she said slowly, pressing each word like a stamp into my skin. "You have me. That's enough." She slammed the phone onto the table. The sound cracked through the house like thunder. That night, I filled 20 pages of apologies. "My fault. I'm sorry. I'll do better." My wrist burned, my vision blurred. But I wrote until she was satisfied, until I could hear her soft footsteps fade down the hall. School became my only safe place. Ms. Parker, my art teacher, noticed before anyone else did. She lingered by my desk one day, eyes resting on my sketchbook. "You draw a lot of doors," she said gently, "but none of them open." I remember looking up at her, the words stuck in my throat. "They're not supposed to." Her eyes softened. She didn't push, not then. But over the next few weeks, she kept checking in, small things. A compliment, a note, a piece of candy slipped onto my desk. Slowly, she built something I'd never known before. Trust. When I finally told her, just a fraction, barely even the truth, she listened. And she believed me. That simple act changed everything. Child services came 2 weeks later. I still remember Mom's smile when the social worker walked in, that perfect porcelain grin that fooled everyone. Her voice was honey, her posture calm. To them, she was warmth personified. But behind her eyes, I saw it. The storm. I was placed with a foster family temporarily. They lived on a quiet street with a golden retriever and a porch swing that creaked when you sat on it. Freedom felt like vertigo. I rode a bike for the first time, ate a cake at a birthday party, laughed until my stomach hurt. The air didn't feel heavy anymore, but I kept waiting for it to. At night, when the house went still, I'd hear her voice in my head. Betrayal. "Lily, you betrayed me." Mom's lessons ran deeper than any bruise. She hadn't just controlled my actions, and she'd claimed my mind. Made me believe independence was dangerous, that safety existed only in her orbit. I grew older, but the fear grew with me. Quiet, patient, waiting. In high school, I took psychology, desperate to understand what she'd done. I learned words for it: enmeshment, coercion, trauma bonding. None of them erased the weight of it, but they gave me language. And language, I realized, was power. Mom faded from my life after that. She stopped calling, or maybe I stopped answering. But she lingered in the smallest things. The hesitation before I trusted someone. The way I flinched at raised voices. The boundaries I built too tall. When I turned 20, I moved to a city far from Burlington. My apartment was small, messy, and utterly mine. I painted again. Bright colors this time, faces with eyes and smiles. I learned how to be a friend, really be one, without fear that love would turn into a leash. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by my window and think of her, not with anger, but with a strange kind of clarity. Survival, I realized, doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding, healing, taking back what was stolen. Love isn't supposed to feel like a cage. Protection isn't supposed to suffocate. Freedom is terrifying. But it's also the only thing that ever felt real. And even when the shadows whisper, even when the old fear stirs, I choose freedom anyway. I can't remember exactly when the house on Cedar Brook Drive stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a stage. Maybe it was after Dad left. Maybe it was long before. Mom always said ballet had taught her that perfection wasn't optional. It was survival. When I was little, I thought that meant she'd teach me grace. But by the time I was 13, I realized it meant she'd watch me the way a choreographer watches a dancer. Every move measured, every flaw magnified. The Whitmore house looked normal enough from the outside. 2 stories, a tidy yard, roses crawling up the trellis. Inside it was all polished floors and sharp corners, every room arranged with the precision of an exhibit. The faint scent of lemon polish hung in the air, thick enough to sting the back of my throat. Her fingerprints were everywhere, vases lined up by height, books stacked by color, picture frames at perfect right angles. Nothing ever out of place. Nothing ever real. I used to love sketching the skyline from my bedroom window, the messy tangle of rooftops, crooked fire escapes, and power lines. But Mom said it was a waste of time. Focus on things that matter, Laya, she'd remind me, her tone gentle but edged with warning. One Thursday in September, I came home with a geometry test balled up in my sweaty hand. 6%, not bad. My friend Mariah had gotten a 72 and was thrilled. I slid the paper onto the kitchen counter, praying Mom wouldn't see it. She saw everything. Her eyes flicked down, taking in the red pen marks. Her lips tightened. "We don't accept mediocrity in this house," she said, her voice calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made the air go still. That night turned into hours of punishment disguised as correction. She made me sit at the dining table while she set up her tablet to record. I had to redo every single problem, explaining each step out loud like a hostage forced to confess. Every time I hesitated, she'd interrupt. "Slower. Think, Laya. Do you want to embarrass yourself forever?" The clock crawled past midnight. My fingers ached. My stomach growled, but I wasn't allowed to eat or use the bathroom. Tears smeared the ink until the numbers bled together. "I'm tired, Mom," I whispered once. Her eyes flashed. "Tired? You can rest when you've earned it. Do you want to end up bagging groceries for the rest of your life? Do it again." By the end, my throat burned from swallowing sobs. She clicked off the tablet, straightened her blouse, and said quietly, "You'll thank me one day." I went to bed numb, clutching my sketchbook under the blanket like contraband. The pages filled with crooked lines and jagged buildings, shapes that didn't have to be perfect. In those moments, the city I drew was the only place I could breathe. The punishment spread like mold. First math, then everything. She started inspecting my room each morning. I couldn't even leave my pencils scattered on the floor. She made me line them up by color, her fingers grazing each jar like a commander reviewing weapons. "Disorder breeds failure," she'd say. She corrected my speech constantly. If I said "like" too many times, she'd stop me mid-sentence and make me start again. If I mispronounced a word, she'd sigh dramatically. "Articulate, Laya, don't sound like some street kid." Even dinner became another performance. Forks had to be held the right way, elbows tucked in, answers rehearsed. Every moment of my life became a lesson I never asked for. At school, I got quieter. My friends invited me to birthday parties and sleepovers, but I always said no. I couldn't risk Mom finding out she didn't approve of them. Teachers noticed the way I flinched when papers were handed back, how I stared too long before unfolding them. But no one asked the right questions. I started hiding my grades. Anything under 95 I erased and rewrote. I even learned to forge Mom's signature so teachers wouldn't know she hadn't seen my progress reports. The lies ate at me. My stomach twisted every time the phone rang, terrified it was school calling home. One night, after she tore apart my English essay for lazy phrasing, I locked myself in the bathroom. I stared into the mirror at my pale reflection, my eyes red from crying. I pressed my hand flat against the glass. "This isn't me," I whispered. But I didn't know who me was anymore. The girl who laughed too loud with her friends, or the one who sat frozen under fluorescent lights while her mother dissected her worth. That fall, the nightmares began. I'd dream I was sitting at the dining table again, surrounded by shadows that whispered her words. Wrong again. Useless. The voices echoed until the walls seemed to breathe. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, feeling like the house had been watching me sleep. Reality wasn't much different. One Saturday morning, I was sketching quietly on the porch while Mom scrubbed the kitchen. Sunlight slanted across the steps. I'd almost finished shading a crooked row of buildings when she appeared behind me. Without a word, she yanked the paper from my hands. "Buildings? This is what you're wasting time on?" she snapped. "It's just a hobby," I muttered, staring at the floor. Her voice sliced the air. "Nothing is just anything. Everything counts. You either excel or you rot." I wanted to scream. Instead, I hid my trembling hands under the porch cushion, the sketchbook wedged beneath. Later that night, when she was asleep, I pulled it out again and traced the faint pencil lines she hadn't managed to tear. The paper shook, but I kept drawing. Crooked buildings, cracked windows, a city that didn't need to be perfect to feel alive. Drawing became my rebellion, small, secret, and dangerously precious. Sometimes neighbors asked if everything was all right. Mrs. Jenkins, the old woman across the street, caught me once sitting on the curb with my eyes red and swollen. "Rough day?" she asked softly, her voice lined with concern. I nodded, staring at the pavement. Mom's words echoed in my head, "Never air dirty laundry." So I forced a smile. "Just tired." Mrs. Jenkins gave me a sympathetic look before heading back inside. I watched her go, my throat burning with all the things I couldn't say. Every test felt like a landmine. Every dinner felt like walking barefoot on glass. I started biting my nails until they bled, the metallic taste of anxiety lingering on my tongue. My chest tightened every time I heard Mom's heels clicking down the hardwood hallway, that sharp rhythm that meant inspection time. When I turned 15, I begged to join the art club at school. "It's after classes," I said carefully, trying to sound logical, not desperate. "It won't interfere with homework." She didn't even look up from her laptop. "Art club?" she repeated, her tone flat. "That's a waste of time. Unless you're planning to starve in some basement studio, forget it." "But Mom..." Her voice cut through mine, sharp as broken glass. "Don't argue. I'm not paying for this house so you can chase childish fantasies." I swallowed everything I wanted to scream. That night I sat in bed with my sketchbook propped on my knees, drawing in the dark. The glow of my phone flashlight was dim and shaky, but it was enough. Each pencil stroke felt like an act of defiance, quiet, invisible rebellion against her version of love. By junior year, panic attacks had become routine. My hands trembled whenever a teacher passed back graded papers. Sometimes I'd lock myself in the school bathroom, clutching the edge of the sink just to steady my breathing. One counselor noticed. She caught me after class and said gently, "Laya, is everything okay at home?" My throat closed. My mind raced with images of Mom's face if she ever found out I'd said something. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a shaky smile. "Just stressed." She nodded, unconvinced, but didn't push. At home, nothing changed. Mom still recorded my study sessions, the tablet perched like a silent witness. Every hesitation became evidence in her courtroom. "See?" she'd say, replaying my mistakes. "You lose focus. That's why you fail." But it wasn't proof to me, it was surveillance. Even when she wasn't in the room, I felt her watching, her eyes embedded in the walls. When I finally left for college, I thought the nightmares would stop. I packed my sketchbooks, a few clothes, and a fragile kind of hope. My new apartment downtown was tiny, a creaky one-bedroom with peeling paint and a window that barely opened, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and cried. Not from sadness, but from the strange, hollow quiet. No footsteps, no orders, no lemon polish stinging the air. And yet, when the fluorescent kitchen light flickered, my body tensed automatically. Some ghosts don't vanish when you cross a city line. I'm older now. I live in Portland, not far from Cedarbrook Drive. Sometimes I pass by the old house. The roses still climb the trellis, their petals immaculate. The lawn's still perfect. From the outside, you'd never guess what happened behind those walls. I still catch myself triple-checking emails before I send them. I still hesitate before speaking in meetings, worried I'll sound foolish. At night, I sometimes wake to the echo of her voice in my mind. Perfection is the only way to survive. And yet, I draw. The walls of my apartment are covered in sketches, messy, uneven, alive. Fire escapes twisting like vines, crooked rooftops, graffiti-filled alleys glowing under streetlights. My art doesn't make money, but it makes me feel real. Every line belongs to me, not her. People say scars fade. Maybe the ones on the skin do, but the deeper ones, the invisible ones, and they just change shape. They teach you how to move, how to flinch, how to breathe. My mother's control left me anxious, wary, afraid of mistakes. But it also left me determined, desperate even, to build a life where imperfection isn't a sin. Sometimes I wonder if she knows what she did. If she ever sits in that silent house and feels the echo of her own words coming back at her. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But I've stopped waiting for an apology. The house is hers. The shadow it left, that's mine to fight. Control disguised as love leaves wounds that never fully heal. Perfection isn't the path to worth. It's the fear of imperfection that destroys us. True strength, I've learned, comes from the courage to be human, flawed, unfinished, and free. People think fast food jobs are brainless. Flip a burger, take an order, go home. Easy. But there's this strange stretch of time in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, when the whole place feels hollow. The lights are buzzing, the fryers are running, but it's like the world outside has gone missing. That emptiness, that silence, that's what I was looking for when I signed up for the overnight shift at the Burger King on South University. I wasn't looking for a paycheck. I just wanted quiet. I was 25, newly single after walking out of a 5-year engagement. No ugly fights, no cheating scandals, nothing you could point at and say, that's why. It was just this slow unraveling, like a thread pulling loose until the whole thing came apart. He wanted me to be someone I wasn't, and I stopped trying to fit. When it finally ended, I packed a duffel bag and moved in with my cousin Rachel. She meant well, but she kept asking questions that sliced into me before I even knew they were coming. Have you called him? Do you think you'll work things out? Are you going to stay here long? Her voice was kind, but it made me feel like I was under a spotlight I couldn't escape. So I started staying away, ducking the conversations before they even began. The graveyard shift was perfect. No sunlight, no polite small talk. Just me and an empty restaurant. Jan, the manager, was a woman in her 50s who'd been through 2 divorces and cared about exactly one thing, the register balancing at the end of the night. She usually left before 2, muttering something about trusting me to close. I didn't mind. Fewer people meant fewer eyes on me. Most nights blurred into each other, a couple of worn-out truckers wanting coffee, night nurses too exhausted to speak in full sentences, maybe a drunk college kid begging for chicken fries because Taco Bell was too far. I'd restock ketchup packets, wipe down trays, hum along to whatever was playing in one earbud while the other stayed tuned to the drive-through headset. The whole store seemed to hum with me, a low electrical sigh like the building was trying to sleep but couldn't. That night didn't start any different. A cold wind rattled the glass doors and the fryer oil smelled sharp, like burnt hash browns that had been sitting too long. I was at the front counter lining up sauce packets when it happened. You should open the back door now. The voice came through the headset. Not the sound of a car pulling up, not the mechanical ding of an order. Just those words. Slow. Clear. My hands froze mid-motion. I slid the headset off my ear and stood there, waiting, my heart stuttering against my ribs. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was static. Then, knock. 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 3 sharp raps at the rear exit. Every muscle in my body went stiff. I knew that door was locked. I'd checked it twice during closing procedures. My brain tried to come up with excuses. Maybe a delivery guy showing up hours too early. Maybe some drunk messing around. But the voice hadn't sounded drunk. It hadn't sounded casual. It had been low, flat, and so sure of itself, it made my skin prickle. I forced myself to walk toward the back kitchen, sneakers squeaking on the greasy tile, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The steel door loomed at the end of the hallway. No window, just a blank slab of metal that seemed to breathe with silence. Then I remembered the camera feed. I ducked into Jan's office and flipped on the monitor above her desk. The screen buzzed to life, grainy and gray, like a security tape from some cheap true crime show. The alley stretched behind the restaurant, dumpster slouched against cracked pavement. Empty, nobody there. I reached for my phone to text Jan, but the signal bar was dead gray. No service. My stomach twisted. I had 5 bars up front, always, but here, nothing. Like something was jamming it. Bang, 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 bang. The pounding started again. Louder. This time not 3 knocks. 5. Fast, angry, relentless. Whoever was out there wasn't just asking anymore. They were demanding. The sound made my chest seize. I backed into the kitchen, grabbed the nearest thing that could count as a weapon. The mop handle leaning against the sink. Useless maybe, but better than empty hands. I crept back toward the door, pressing my ear against the cold steel. Silence. I waited, counted to 20 in my head. Nothing. Just the faint buzz of the lights. Maybe they'd left. Maybe I could just pretend none of it happened. I turned, ready to head back toward the counter, and froze. On the monitor, the grainy black and white feed flickered. A figure had appeared in the alley. A man moving slowly, dragging something heavy across the cracked pavement toward the dumpster. He was tall, wearing hospital scrubs. Blood streaked his arms, glistening under the grainy glow of the security feed. His walk was off, slow, uneven, like each step cost him something. He dragged what looked like a heavy bundle, maybe a blanket, maybe a body bag, and dropped it by the dumpster with a dull thud. Then he stopped, lifted his head, and turned toward the camera. His face was pale, hollow. He stared straight into the lens like he knew I was watching. That's when the alarm beeped. The back door had just been opened. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. My throat was raw for days afterward. I slammed the office door shut and twisted the flimsy knob lock until it clicked. It was one of those cheap twist locks that felt more like a suggestion than actual security. I pressed my whole body against the door anyway, praying the weight of me would be enough. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Dead silence. I grabbed my phone again. Still no signal. Not a single bar. Then I heard them. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, dragging across the tile. He was inside. His breathing came next. Harsh, ragged, like someone on the verge of collapsing. The sound was close. Too close. He stopped just outside the office door. Then came the voice. Phone, keys. The same voice I'd heard earlier through the headset. Calm, commanding, too steady to be human in the state he looked. I froze, chest clamped tight, trying not to make a sound. "Don't be stupid," he said after a pause. "I don't want to hurt you." Those words made my blood run cold. They weren't reassuring. They were a threat dressed up as kindness. Hands trembling, I pushed my phone and keys under the gap in the door. A hand appeared, bloodied, trembling, veins bulging, and scooped them up. Then silence again. I waited. 10 seconds, 30, a full minute. My pulse was hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it through the door. Then I heard the front bell chime. The door sensors. He'd walked out the main entrance. I forced myself to count. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 300. 5 full minutes. My legs were numb by the time I moved. Still clutching the mop like it was a weapon, I inched out of the office. The kitchen looked normal. Fryers humming, lights buzzing, same as before, except for the back door. The metal frame was bent, the deadbolt hanging loose, kicked clean out of place. I pushed outside, chest tight, scanning the lot. Nothing but cold air pressing against me and the sharp tang of oil clinging to my clothes. Then headlights washed over the lot. A garbage truck lumbering in to empty the dumpster. I bolted toward it, waving my arms, yelling, my voice shredded. The driver leaned out, eyes wide like he wasn't sure if I was drunk or insane. But he opened the door, let me climb in. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold onto the rail. We called 911 from his radio. The cops came fast, lights flashing against the empty asphalt. They swarmed the building, asking me questions I could barely process. I remember one of them saying the man had escaped from a mental health facility just 12 blocks away. He'd stabbed a nurse, barefoot, bleeding, and disappeared into the dark. They confirmed it was him by the prints he left on the counter. The same counter where I'd served drive-through orders earlier. He'd been there, watching me, and I never noticed. They found the nurse's scrubs by the dumpster, and something else they wouldn't explain. When I asked, their eyes slid away, like they didn't want me knowing. I quit the next morning. No argument from Jan. She just gave me this look, a flat, weary nod, like she'd seen things before, and understood. Within weeks, I moved out of Rachel's place, got a small studio in Midtown, took a remote data entry job. Boring, sure, but I sleep at night now. Mostly. Some habits don't leave, though. I never use drive-thrus alone anymore. Doesn't matter if it's pouring rain at 2 in the morning. I park, I walk inside. At home, I double lock every door, then I check them again. My phone stays charged. I make sure every room has signal. People think horror is some monster under the bed, some shadow in the corner. But real horror? Real horror is how close danger gets. Just on the other side of a thin door you thought was locked. He didn't float through walls like a ghost. He walked in like a man who wanted something. A man who saw me and decided I wasn't leaving that night. And in a world that tells women not to be dramatic, not to overreact, to smile and be polite, stories like mine are reminders. Discomfort isn't paranoia. Fear isn't weakness. It's warning. It's survival. You don't wake up thinking your life's gonna end in a parking lot behind a damn Burger King at 3 in the morning. Nobody plans for that. Hell, nobody plans for much. I used to be somebody with steady work, a union card, and health benefits. Drove forklifts at the GM plants when Detroit still had a pulse. I knew the floor, knew the machines, knew the rhythm of a 12-hour shift that left your body sore but your wallet full enough to feel like you had a place in the world. But loyalty doesn't count when your back seizes up and the layoffs hit. When the pain in your spine makes rolling out of bed feel like hauling steel, no supervisor is going to fight for you. I filed disability after the mornings got so bad I couldn't even tie my boots. Twice denied. Government says I'm still fit to work. Fit for what exactly? Limping across cracked pavement in sub-zero wind for barely above minimum wage? Clutching a heating pad like it's holy scripture? Guess so. That's how I ended up guarding this Burger King on Livernois, one of corporate's little experiments. 24-hour service in dead neighborhoods, the kind of spots where the streetlights stay busted and everyone pretends not to notice. My job was simple. Watch the loading dock, log the trucks, scare off loiterers, keep folks from ripping out copper or stealing fryer oil. I wasn't armed. Just a flashlight, a plastic badge, and a panic button clipped to my vest like it was supposed to mean something. Most nights it was me in the back, a couple of bored kids running the counter up front, and maybe a delivery driver rolling in half asleep. Honestly, I didn't mind it. Quiet felt easier than talking these days. I'd sit in the break room with my little space heater buzzing like a tired cricket, sipping gas station coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. 4 black and white security feeds flickered above me, grainy as hell but steady enough to catch a shadow if one showed up. It was a dead man's shift in a dead corner of the city, and I'd gotten used to it. That Monday, the cold was the kind that cracks teeth. It didn't just sting, it crawled under your skin and set up shop in your bones. You breathe and wonder if the steam from your mouth is the only proof you're still alive. I remember checking my watch, 3 a.m. sharp. I just finished logging a missed delivery window. Cisco was scheduled for 2:30, no-showed like half the time. I was thinking about heating up the leftover chili in my lunchbox when something flickered across the dock cam. Quick, low to the ground. Looked like an animal darting past the dumpster. I leaned in, squinting. No sound, just a blur. I figured raccoon, maybe a stray dog. Not the first time. But then another shape bled into the frame. Taller, human, just inside the blind spot where the camera fizzled. Hoodie pulled low, black jeans, face swallowed by the shadows. He wasn't moving, just standing there, like he was waiting. My gut went tight, that prickling at the back of the neck you don't argue with. I threw on my vest, grabbed the flashlight, and shoved the door open into the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. The dock lights were doing that useless flicker, buzzing like flies. "Hey!" I shouted, breath pluming out in front of me. "You're not supposed to be back here." Silence. Nothing but wind scraping the alley. I swept the beam across the containers, stepping slow toward the dumpster. Just empty shadows. My boot crunched ice, and for a second I thought maybe I'd spooked myself into seeing things. Then pain cracked the back of my knee, sharp, blinding. My leg folded under me, and I slammed shoulder first onto the pavement. The air shot out of me, ribs screaming as another blow landed. Hard, fast, a boot digging deep. My chest refused to inflate, every breath clawing at nothing. I rolled, desperate, dragging myself across the frozen ground just in time to see them. 2 more figures flooding in from the alley, all black, faces hidden. Moving with a speed that told me they'd done this before. One snatched my vest and ripped the radio clean off my belt. Another dug at my keys. I swung my flashlight wild, metal cracking against an arm, maybe a shoulder, I couldn't tell. My leg wasn't working right. Pain was boiling through it, turning every move into a crawl. And still they came, closing in like shadows that didn't care whether I screamed or not. "Where's the office? Where's the eating office?" One of them barked, his voice sharp, cutting through the freezing air. That was when it hit me. They weren't here for me. I was just an obstacle. They wanted in. The back entrance, the safe, the codes. And they thought I knew how to get them inside. This wasn't random. They'd planned it, maybe even scouted me. While one yanked at the dock door like he already knew it led straight into the kitchen, another crouched over me. I barely registered the movement before pain exploded through my knee. A crowbar swung with enough force to buckle bone. My scream came raw, torn straight from my chest. "Next time," the one closest to me said, almost casual, almost like advice, "Stay inside, old man." Then he bolted after the others, black silhouettes swallowed by the alley. I didn't remember slamming the panic button, but there it was, glowing red against my vest. Somewhere, a dispatcher would see it. Somewhere, help was on the way. I laid there for what felt like hours, lungs working in ragged sips of air. Snow was falling in soft flakes, blurring the world into something unreal. My ribs screamed with each breath. My leg throbbed with every heartbeat. My tongue tasted of blood where I'd bitten through it. I started crawling, hands burning against ice, elbows dragging me inch by inch until the break room door was under my fingers. I pulled myself inside and collapsed against the heater, the buzz of it sounding like salvation. The adrenaline bled out, leaving nothing but pain. Every bone felt broken, every breath a knife. 7 minutes later, red and blue lights painted the lot. 7 minutes. longer than I'd thought I'd survive. The cops came fast, guns drawn, EMTs right behind them. They loaded me onto a stretcher. As they wheeled me out, I caught sight of the security monitors still flickering their grainy black and white feed, showing nothing useful. "Guy's lucky," one officer muttered, thinking I couldn't hear. They knew this place. That sentence hit harder than the crowbar, because he was right. They hadn't stumbled in drunk. They hadn't tested the front doors or circled aimlessly. They came straight for the loading dock, straight for the weak point. Someone told them, or someone had been watching. 3 days in the hospital. Concussion. 2 cracked ribs. A shattered kneecap. The doctor told me I'd walk again, but not without a limp. The company offered a desk role, counseling, paid leave. I told them no. I never worked another night shift. Instead, I turned my house into a fortress. Camera on the porch. Camera over the driveway. Motion lights on every corner. My neighbors laugh. They say I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But I keep replaying that one moment. The second I almost buzzed them in, thinking it was just an early truck. That's what keeps me up. Not the crowbar, not the pain. The near miss. If I'd pressed that buzzer, they wouldn't have just gone for the safe. They could have gone after the kids up front, the cashier. Hell, they could have killed me anyway. The scariest part? I still don't know if they ever caught them. Nobody ever said. Maybe they never will. What I do know is this. Routine is dangerous. It dulls your guard. That split second when you think you're safe, when you stop listening to the knot in your gut. That's when it happens. That's when you lose everything. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's safe. I'd been stuck behind the fryer at Burger King for 6 months straight, and it felt like my life had shrunk down to grease burns and the constant bark of managers telling me to move faster when I was already drenched in sweat. I never said a word back. Couldn't afford to. Every paycheck went straight to rent and helping my little sister cover tuition. If there was anything left over, I tucked it away for that second-hand Kawasaki I'd been stalking on Facebook Marketplace. That dream kept me going when my hands stung from oil splatters. Jessica, my girlfriend, hated watching me grind myself down. She kept telling me I needed real air, not the fryer exhaust kind. I can still see her smirking, tapping her nose like she was trying to erase the smell for me. Eventually, I gave in. We planned a quick camping trip up to Carson National Forest. Just 2 days, nothing extravagant. Just us, a tent, a campfire, and no clock punching. For a moment, it felt like life widened out again. Saturday night, we grilled hot dogs over a fire, and I realized I couldn't even remember the last time I'd seen the stars without city haze swallowing them. Sunday came too fast. We packed up early, thinking we'd beat the highway traffic and maybe grab dinner somewhere on the way back. I checked the time, just past 6, when I noticed the fog creeping in. It wasn't light, playful fog. It came heavy, low to the ground, spilling between the trees like it had a purpose. The kind of fog that muffles sound, that makes the forest feel like it's holding its breath. "Babe, high beams," Jessica said, pressing her forehead to the window. I shook my head. "That just bounces the light back, makes it worse." She gave me that look. I still think it helps. We were laughing about it, half teasing, half stubborn, when the truck lurched beneath me. A pine tree, huge, thick as a damn telephone pole, lay across the road, and I had no time. My foot slammed the brake. The truck fishtailed, then slammed sideways into the log. There was a bang, a puff of chalky white airbag powder, then black. When I came to, my ears were ringing. The windshield was spidered with cracks but hadn't shattered. Steam hissed up from the hood, carrying the burnt plastic smell that mixed with the damp bite of pine bark. My throat burned as I coughed it in. Jessica. My head snapped to her seat. Her seatbelt had failed, snapped clean. Her body had thrown forward and, God, I can't even say it without feeling my stomach flip. Something long, sharp, and wood-colored was lodged straight through her chest. A branch. Just a branch, I told myself, repeating it like a prayer. Somehow it had pierced through the grill, straight into her torso. Her hoodie was dark with blood, clinging to her ribs, dripping onto her jeans. Her mouth hung open just a little. Her eyes were wide, too wide, fixed but trembling at the edges like she was fighting to keep them open. "Jessica," I whispered, barely breathing. At first, nothing. Then her lips parted and a sound came out, broken and wet, more gasp than word. "Jessica." My voice cracked. She made a shallow noise again, something so faint and ragged it didn't sound human. But it was life. Barely. I clawed for my phone, thumb shaking, but the screen showed 0 bars. Panic burned in my chest. I stumbled out, waving it in the air like an idiot, like that would drag a signal out of the fog. Nothing. Just trees. Just silence. I couldn't scream. I wanted to, but the thought of her hearing me break down froze the sound in my throat. The truck had tilted into a ditch, nose first. I tore open the glove box, desperate for anything, and found my old fishing knife, dull and rusty but sharp enough to cut. I climbed onto the hood, heart hammering, and pressed the blade to the wood. The bark tore in strips, splinters sticking into my palms as I sawed. My hands shook so violently I dropped the knife twice, each time cursing loud enough to echo into the trees. Jessica moaned once, just once, and then went silent again, leaving only my ragged breathing and the rasp of steel against wood. I couldn't tell if I was saving her or killing her. Every scrape of the knife felt like a gamble. Time turned cruel. It stretched and folded, refusing to move. Maybe 40 minutes passed, maybe longer. My arms went dead, my hands blistered. I kept sawing, because stopping meant facing the truth that I didn't know what the hell I was doing, that I might already be too late. The fog thickened until it felt like the whole world had been swallowed. The last of the sun slid below the tree line, leaving us in a gray wash that pressed against the glass. I kept whispering, desperate, my voice hoarse. "Hold on, Jess, please, baby, just hold on." I don't know if she heard me. I just couldn't stop saying it. Then, through the blur of trees, there was a flicker. Light. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stumbled out of the cab, waving my arms like a lunatic. "Hey, over here!" A rusted red pickup rolled slow out of the fog. It looked ancient, its headlights dim, the grille rattling with every bump. The driver stepped out. Camo jacket, blaze orange cap pulled low, a cigarette stuck to his lip. A rifle sat in the gun rack behind him. He squinted through the fog at the wreck. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough, low. I shook my head hard, words spilling out before I could even think. "No, she's dying. Please, please help us." The man didn't hesitate. No questions, no wasted seconds. He popped open the back seat of his truck, pulled out a chainsaw, yanked the cord twice, and the engine roared to life. The sound ripped through the fog, sharp and alive like the world had been waiting for it. "Keep her steady," he yelled over the roar. "Don't let her move." I clambered back into the cab, pressing my hands against Jessica's shoulders, trying to hold her still even though her body was trembling, shuddering. My hands were slick with blood, slipping as I gripped her hoodie. The smell was overwhelming, iron and bark and exhaust. The blade bit into the branch, spitting chips across the dash in violent bursts. Each second felt like an eternity, the noise drilling into my skull. Finally, the branch cracked, gave way, and slid free. Together, the man and I eased Jessica out. He wrapped her carefully in thick, scratchy hunting blankets, his hands steady as stone, and lifted her into the back seat of his truck like she was something fragile that might break if he breathed wrong. "I know a ranger station," he said, voice grim but sure. 20 minutes, maybe 25. "Hold her." I slid in beside her, cradling her head, whispering nonstop. "Stay with me, Jess. Stay. Please don't go." My voice was raw, but I couldn't stop. The rest is fragments, the white burn of fluorescent lights, the steady beep of monitors. the ceiling of a hospital in Albuquerque. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember walking through the ER doors. I just remember not letting go of her hand. Jessica stayed in a coma for 14 days. The doctor said the branch had torn through her lung, missed her heart by less than an inch, and grazed her spine. It's a miracle she made it to us alive, one of them told me, shaking his head. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I just sat, waiting. The night she woke up, I was half asleep in a chair, my head tilted back, neck stiff. Her fingers twitched against mine. Then her lips moved. No words came, just a breathy sound, but when her eyes opened, they looked at me. Really looked. I broke. I dropped to my knees, pulled out the cheap silver ring I'd been carrying in my wallet for months, afraid to give it to her before. My voice cracked as I said, "If this life tried to take you, then it's going to have to go through me first." She blinked once, then again, and even with the tubes and the pain, I swear, she smiled. Weeks later, after she started physical therapy, I went back to the line. Same grease, same fryer, same endless sizzle of fries. But it wasn't the same. Every hiss of oil sounded like fog breaking open on a dark road. Sometimes in the middle of a dinner rush, I'd freeze. All I'd see was the blood, the fog, her body limp against the seatbelt. My chest would seize up until I forced myself to move. I bought a trauma kit and carry it in my backpack every day. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's paranoid. But I can't be helpless again. Jessica walks now, slowly, carefully. She jokes that the scar down her chest makes her half forest. She laughs when she says it, but I see the pain in her steps. We don't talk much about that night, but every time we hit a stretch of fog or drive past a downed branch, I take her hand and squeeze it, and she squeezes back. Disaster doesn't knock first. Sometimes it just explodes through your windshield. The test isn't whether you were ready, it's whether you can respond before everything changes. And if you love someone, show them now, because 1 hour, one choice, can redraw your whole life. When I was 20, I thought my dad couldn't be touched. He didn't have money stacked away like people imagined, but he had a way of making the world treat him like he did. He wore pressed shirts, shiny shoes, and carried himself with this sharp, untouchable confidence, like he could walk into a stranger's living room and claim the couch. Back home in Bentonville, Arkansas, everyone knew him as the import-export guy. That was the polite way of saying he dealt in antiques and restoration projects. But the way he described it, you'd think he was on some holy mission, preserving the past, he'd always say. Like every cracked table leg he fixed was a contribution to history itself. I believed him. Hell, I worshipped him. That summer, I was just a kid pushing buttons at the front counter of Burger King trying to balance night classes at the community college. My life wasn't grand, just grease burns, homework, and enough paychecks to keep my used Corolla from breaking down. One Friday night, when the Friars had gone quiet between the dinner rush and the late-night crowd, Dad pushed through the doors. He didn't look like himself. His shirt wasn't buttoned right, his face was drawn tight, and he didn't even glance at the menu. "We need to go," he muttered, eyes darting around the place like someone might have been watching. "Now. Family emergency." 15 minutes later, the car was loaded. Mom didn't argue, not once. She just sank into the passenger seat, her face pale with exhaustion, the kind that made her look older than she was. My little sister, Laya, hugged her backpack to her chest like it was oxygen. I kept pressing Dad for answers. "What happened? What kind of emergency?" "Business," he said, his tone clipped, flat. "Complications in Indiana. I've got to clean it up." And that was it. We drove through the night. I remember the glow of gas stations on empty highways, vending machine dinners, the silence so heavy it buzzed in my ears. Just past sunrise, Dad pulled us off I-65 and into a nowhere town called Edinburgh, Indiana. He parked at a sagging little motel tucked behind a strip mall. The neon sign above the office sputtered like it couldn't make up its mind about being alive or dead. Through our window, the red flicker from a Burger King logo across the parking lot pulsed into the room like a heartbeat. That motel became our hideout. That's where my belief in Dad cracked. The air inside smelled like mildew soaked into the curtains, with stale cigarette smoke layered on top, the kind of stench that clung to your clothes no matter how much you washed. The furniture belonged in a dump, scratchy floral bedspreads, a buzzing lamp that wouldn't turn off unless you yanked the plug. Dad didn't settle in. He paced the parking lot or whispered into his phone. When he was inside, his voice dropped low, but the walls might as well have been cardboard. I lay on the carpet with my earbuds in, pretending to scroll through music, but the playlist wasn't playing. That's when I caught it. They're already sniffing around, Dad whispered, each word sharp. Tell them it's just a franchise invoice. No, the Edinburgh one, the fast food channel. Yeah, move it or shred it. Silence. Then one more word slipped out before the line clicked dead. Feds. I froze. My chest went tight, like someone had pressed their hand hard over my ribs. This wasn't a shipping mistake. This wasn't some cranky client upset about an antique dresser. He was hiding something. Something real. Something that could bury us. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and kept replaying the past in my head. The crates that arrived at odd hours. The men who paid him in stacks of cash. The way he'd laugh when I asked questions and say, "Don't worry about it, son. Just business." I used to think it was his eccentricity, part of the mysterious aura he liked to cultivate. Now it felt like laundering, fraud, crime. We lived off gas station burritos that weekend, nuked in dirty microwaves. Every time I looked out the window at that Burger King across the parking lot, my stomach twisted. Same crown posters plastered on the wall, same greasy counter setup, same sticky soda machine. It could have been the one I'd left back in Arkansas. The same, but not. It felt like a copy in a nightmare. A twin store holding a secret I wasn't meant to name. And all I could do was sit there, pretending not to know that my father's life, our life, was built on something rotten. Only this one turned out to be a lie. 2 nights later, he was gone. No goodbye, no warning, just vanished. Sometime after 3 in the morning, he slipped out. Mom thought he'd run down to the gas station for cigarettes. By noon, the bed was still cold, his duffel gone from the foot of it. No note, no call, just absence, like he'd been erased overnight. Mom kept stabbing at her phone, listening to his voicemail pick up again and again. Laya clutched her backpack and sobbed until her voice cracked. I sat there useless, listening to both of them unravel. The knock came around 6 that evening. 2 men stood at the door. One wore a windbreaker with a Department of Homeland Security badge clipped to his belt. The other looked carved out of concrete. Gray suit, no smile, a small black notepad balanced in one hand. "Is Robert Calloway here?" the agent asked. My mom froze, her hand still clutching the doorframe. He went out. They exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. "Ma'am," the man in the suit said evenly, "we're conducting an investigation into fraudulent business operations involving counterfeit goods, including stolen or misrepresented antiquities. Does that sound familiar to you?" Her silence said more than words. They didn't press her about us. They weren't here for the family, only him. But the questions kept coming anyway. Did he use this location for storage? Did he ever hold business meetings here? Did he mention the restaurant across the parking lot? Did he leave anything behind? We shook our heads, stumbling through half-truths. They left a card on the nightstand and a warning that clung to the air. Don't leave town without checking in. We left anyway, back to Bentonville quietly, like dogs slinking home after being kicked. The fallout came fast. Back home, it was like someone had vacuumed my father out of existence. His shop stood dark, windows papered over, a government lock on the door. His bank accounts were frozen, Our mailbox filled with notices written in the kind of legal language you can feel bruising your ribs even if you don't understand it. Mom filed for divorce 2 months later. No ceremony, no fight, just a cold signature. I quit Burger King that same week. I couldn't stand standing behind a counter asking people if they wanted to make it a combo, while my life felt like it had been downgraded to scraps. My friends asked what happened. I gave the only answer that didn't splinter me. He's gone. I drifted after that. Switched my major from marketing to art history. At first it felt like running away, but then it started to feel like running towards something. If Dad had built a life out of fakes, maybe I could spend mine learning to spot them. To strip away the lies, put the truth under glass where everyone could see. Years blurred together. I interned at a gallery, worked my way up, and eventually got invited to a regional art fair. Of all places, Edinburgh, Indiana. I told myself I wouldn't visit that Burger King, but of course I did. The place had been scrubbed up since that summer. Fresh paint, digital menus, cushioned booths, trying hard to look modern like the past had been gutted and replaced with something shinier. But the bones were the same. I stepped in wearing a blazer, clean-shaven, pretending I was just another traveler grabbing a bite. My eyes went straight to the ceiling, and there they were, 2 cracked tiles above the soda fountain. Faint, almost hidden, the same cracks that had been there 8 years earlier, when the neon light from the motel window had bled into the room. They hadn't fixed them. I stood there, every memory rising back at once. Mom's quiet, Laya's crying, that motel that smelled like mildew and smoke. My father's voice in the dark whispering lies about franchise invoices. He built everything on a lie, I whispered, my throat tight. Even the food court. I didn't order, didn't stay. I just walked back out into the Indiana evening. Now I collect truths, not antiques, not heirlooms. Truths. Sharp, ugly, unpolished. The kind you don't display in glass cases. The kind that don't crack under pressure. Because not everything we inherit deserves to be kept. Some legacies are meant to shatter so we can rebuild from the shards and call it our own. I moved to Mobile, Pennsylvania because it was quiet. After 23 years of living under my parents' microscope, being told what to wear, how to speak, when to smile, I felt like I was suffocating. I needed space, even if it was just across the state line. Crossing that border felt less like a move and more like slipping into a version of my life that could finally be mine. I rented a small 1-bedroom above a bakery that smelled like sugar at dawn and like burnt dough by noon. The ovens roared awake too early, and the place shut its doors too fast, leaving the street oddly hollow in the evenings. I signed up for night classes in graphic design at the community college and landed a cashier job at the Burger King on Water Street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and for a few hours each shift I could vanish behind a name tag and a drive-through headset. Just another voice saying, "Welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?" Most of my shifts were early evenings, nothing wild. Truckers, exhausted parents, wrangling toddlers, the occasional group of college kids looking for cheap fries. It was routine, forgettable. But one week when my manager caught the flu, she asked me to cover the late shift. I needed the hours. That's when I first saw him. Booth number 6, far corner, sitting just outside the sickly cone of light from a bulb that flickered like it was trying to die. He was tall, late 30s maybe, with a beard that looked like it belonged on someone who hadn't shaved in months. His coat wasn't really a coat. It was heavy and shapeless, draped over him like a brown blanket. He ordered only water. No fries, no burger, no coffee. Just water. He didn't look threatening, not exactly. But he didn't look like he belonged either. I remember walking past and asking lightly, "Are you waiting on someone?" He smiled, small, polite, wrong somehow. "Nope, just passing through." And he stayed until close. The next night he was there again, same booth, same glass of water, no phone, no book, no distraction, just eyes, watching. By the third night, I was refilling ketchup packets when I passed his booth. His voice stopped me cold. "You changed your hair." I had, just barely. A simple clip, pulling it back tighter. I hadn't told anyone. The comment sank into me like ice water. My stomach curled. I forced a smile, muttered something like, "Yeah, I guess," and walked away. Too fast, faster than I meant to, toward the Fryer station. My hands shook so badly I almost spilled the ketchup. That was when I noticed something else. I never saw him come in. The realization hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Every night that week, I clocked in 10 minutes early. I'd check the parking lot, glance through the windows. Empty. But by the time I tied my apron and turned around, he was already there. Booth 6. Always the coat. Always the stillness. He didn't sit like a customer waiting for food. He sat like someone who had arrived hours ago, settled into the space like it belonged to him. I told myself I must have missed him walking in. Maybe while I was tying my shoes or fiddling with the back computer or adjusting my headset. But the thought gnawed at me. How quiet he seemed. How he just appeared. By Thursday, I was walking on eggshells. My manager, still pale and coughing, kept thanking me too enthusiastically for covering her shift. I didn't want to add to her worries, so I kept my mouth shut. But something was wrong. That night, closing was almost finished. The last chore was cleaning the women's restroom. I grabbed the mop, opened the supply closet, and froze. Hanging inside, on the hook where we kept spare aprons and dust rags, was his coat. My throat locked. I hadn't seen him come in that night. Booth 6 was empty, but the coat was here, in the building, in my space. I turned around. He was standing in the hallway, not close, but close enough to block the exit. His face was faintly lit by the overhead bulb. He smiled, almost gentle, as if this was a reunion instead of a nightmare. "I used to sit here back when you worked in Pittsburgh," he said calmly. His voice was steady, warm even. "Remember that coffee shop on 6th? My breath snagged. That cafe had closed over a year ago. I'd only worked there for 6 months before moving. I could barely remember the faces that passed through every day, but he remembered me. "You always apologized when you ran out of oat milk," he added, chuckling under his breath. "You always said sorry too much." I backed up until my shoulders hit the shelves inside the closet. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the fire extinguisher, but I didn't dare reach for it. Not yet. Not with his eyes on me. "I followed your work online," he added, his voice low, almost conversational, as he stepped forward just enough for the space to shrink. "You have a soft line, like you draw with guilt." That was it. My body reacted before my mind did. I don't remember deciding to move. I just did. I ducked low, pivoted past him, the smell of his coat brushing my shoulder, and ran. The kitchen blurred around me as I slammed through the swinging door, sneakers squealing on the greasy tiles. I hit the back fire exit bar so hard it bruised both palms. The alarm shrieked into the night. Cold air smacked me across the face. I sprinted over the icy parking lot, lungs burning, past the dead drive-through speaker, straight toward the glow of the gas station next door. I didn't look back until I was behind the bulletproof glass of the counter, bent double, gasping like I'd drowned and broken the surface. The attendant, barely 19, slouched behind the register with a phone in his hand, looked like he was about to crack a joke until he saw my face. His smirk fell. "You okay?" he asked. "Call the cops," I rasped, voice tearing in my throat. "Please." 18 minutes. That's how long it took them to show up. 18 minutes where I stood trembling under buzzing fluorescent lights, staring at the Burger King across the lot like he might glide out of the shadows at any second, like he'd tap on the glass with that faint, knowing smile. But he never came. By the time the officers searched the building, he was gone. No coat, no footprints in the slush outside. Just silence so thick it pressed on my ears, making the hum of the overhead lights sound unnatural, almost angry. But they found something. In the supply closet where I'd seen his coat hanging, they pulled out a notebook. Black cover, warped from moisture, corners fraying. When they opened it, my name was written on the first page. After that came dates, times, locations, sketches of me, sitting at the cafe, walking out of class, carrying groceries. Some pages listed the most trivial details: what sandwich I ordered for lunch, how I wore my hair, the exact shade of pen I used in my sketches. One page broke me. A list written in my handwriting. Sorry for the wait. Sorry we're out of vanilla. Sorry I didn't see you. My voice, my old apologies copied and cataloged. The police said he had likely been following me for over a year. I quit the next morning. No 2 weeks' notice, no final paycheck. I didn't even bother to clear out my locker. I went home, stuffed everything I owned into boxes and garbage bags, and drove east to Albany by nightfall. My cousin Jen had a spare room, heavy curtains and deadbolts on every door. I filed for a protection order. The cops searched for him, but nothing turned up. No fingerprints, no ID, no registered vehicle. They said he probably used fake names, maybe burner phones. They told me I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt contaminated, like he had seeped into my skin and nested there. I tried to go back to classes, but I couldn't focus. My sketches changed. My professor told me they had grown sharper, more anxious. He meant it as praise. I didn't take it as one. Now, I don't start with light outlines the way I used to. I start with shadows, with the shape of a figure I can't stop seeing. It's been a year. I've rebuilt most of my life. I work part-time at a small art supply store, take commissions, pet portraits, digital logos. It's quiet, safe enough. But I don't take night shifts anymore. I don't walk home alone. I don't sit with my back to any door. And every time I clean a closet, I check it twice. People tell me I'm too cautious, too jumpy. They smile kindly when they say it. I smile back, but I don't tell them the truth. Once you've been watched like prey, the feeling never leaves. You just learn to trace it faster, to draw the outlines of danger before anyone else sees the shape. I'm not the same girl who used to apologize to strangers for no reason. I don't apologize for being afraid anymore. I survived him, and I'll never go back to booth 6. If your instincts whisper, listen. You don't owe kindness to someone who makes you feel unsafe. Not every quiet smile is harmless. Not every watcher wants to be seen. I moved to Jacksonville when I was 26, thinking it would feel like a clean slate. My internship in remote marketing paid enough to cover rent. My online classes kept me busy, and on paper everything looked steady. But the silence of a new city set in faster than I expected. It was the kind of loneliness that made the walls of my room feel like they were leaning in. My roommate Jess kept pushing me to get out there, even suggested dating. Just go meet people, she'd say, waving her phone at me. You don't have to marry them. So one night I gave in and downloaded a few apps, telling myself I only wanted conversation, companionship, nothing heavy. That's when I matched with David from Orange Park. His profile made him look approachable. Early 30s, scruffy beard, vintage jackets, captions about handwritten letters and retro diners. His messages had a kind of calmness to them. Long paragraphs about his favorite books, the way he liked to unplug on weekends. For the first time in months, I felt noticed. After a week of back and forth, he suggested we meet. Nothing fancy, he wrote. Burger King on Atlantic, then a movie across the street. It sounded so simple it felt safe. I told him I'd be driving my white Civic. He promised he'd be there by 7, wearing green. I pulled into the lot a little late, around 7:10. My stomach dropped. The man waiting wasn't the softly smiling David from the photos. He looked closer to 40, with a bushy, unkempt beard and a jacket so oversized it seemed to swallow him. He kept shifting on his feet, jittery, as I walked up. I told myself maybe the photos were just old. I'd already come this far. Inside, I ordered fries and a Coke, trying to act casual. He didn't say a word to the cashier, just stared while I fumbled with my tray. At the booth, he gave me a soft smile, but his eyes didn't blink enough. His gaze sat heavy, like a weight pressing me into the seat. "You live alone now, right?" he asked, voice so low I almost thought I misheard. My hand froze halfway to the fry box. I never said that out loud. Had I slipped in a text? I couldn't remember, but my stomach clenched. He stretched his legs under the table, leaning forward. "You probably don't want more fries after that shift," he added, like he was being helpful. My chest tightened. I hadn't told him where I worked, much less when I worked. A chill crawled up my back, prickling every nerve. I forced a thin smile and stared at the fizz in my Coke, trying to steady my breathing. The window beside us reflected our faces side by side, and all I could think was, "This is wrong." I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over a half-typed text to Jess about homework deadlines, trying to make it look normal. That's when his hand darted across the table. His fingers brushed my wrist. Light, but enough to jolt me. He pulled back quickly. "Sorry," he murmured, lips curving into a faint smile. "Just thought I sensed you weren't okay." I shook my head, forcing out a laugh that sounded wrong even to me. "I'm fine." Then his phone lit up. The glow bounced off his jacket and reflected in the window. My heart thudded as I saw what was on the screen. It wasn't a dating app, it was my Facebook page. Not recent, an old post from 2020. A photo of me with friends, words about moving away from home, about anxiety. My pulse hammered in my throat. No one who just wanted a retro diner vibe first date would be scrolling through years-old posts. "I'm going to the bathroom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He only nodded, eyes following me as I slid out of the booth. In the stall, my hands shook so hard it took 3 tries to type. "Emergency. Come now, please." I hit send to Jess. Footsteps passed outside the door. Too slow, too close. I pressed a hand over my mouth, praying Jess was already on her way. When I finally forced myself out, he was there by the exit, half hidden behind a decorative plant. His eyes locked on me. "Your car's a white Civic, right?" I stopped cold. My throat worked, but the only word that came was, "Yes." He smiled, like it was the answer he'd been waiting for. I turned before the smile could settle into my memory. My legs moved before my mind caught up, carrying me past the counter, toward the kitchen, cutting corners so fast I nearly tripped. I just knew I couldn't let him follow me out to that car. I slammed through the swinging kitchen doors, my voice cracking before the words even formed. "Help! Please! Can someone call the police? He's following me." The crew froze mid-shift, trays half-stacked, rags in their hands. A cashier's eyes went wide, scanning my face like she wasn't sure if I was serious. But then Melissa, the night cook, stepped forward. She shoved the fire exit closed with her shoulder, twisting the lock. Another worker yanked the service hatch down with a heavy clang. "Back here," Melissa said firmly, steering me into a small storage room that smelled of fryer oil and cardboard boxes. I collapsed onto a crate, chest heaving. My words tumbled out in broken loops. Booth 6. He was in booth 6. That guy, he knew things about me. They exchanged worried glances but stayed close, one of them hovering near the door like a guard. Sirens cut through the night a few minutes later, faint at first, but growing sharper, vibrating through the walls. Each sound jolted me. I kept whispering to myself, "Someone's here. Someone's coming." The police arrived at 7:47. Their questions came fast, clipped. Description, phone screen. What exactly did he say? I told them everything. The bushy beard, buffalo plaid shirt hidden under his coat, the watch cinched too tight against his wrist. I told them how he knew I lived alone, how he knew about my shift. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. They searched the lot. An officer came back holding a clear evidence bag, a burner phone fished from a storm drain. On it, screenshots of my Facebook profile, years-old posts, even voice memos labeled with my name. Lena Price. "You did the right thing," one officer said, hand heavy on my back. Another added, "You're brave. You're lucky." Their words felt like a mix of comfort and dismissal, a way to close the file and move on. I left the Burger King under their escort. The parking lot lights glared white-hot, drilling straight through my chest. The next morning, I wiped every dating app from my phone, deleted the accounts, changed my number. I texted Jess, "I need to stay with you for a while." She didn't ask questions, just cleared a corner of her apartment. I moved in temporarily, living with the lights dim but always on, doors double-locked, curtains tight as skin. When I reinstalled social apps, I did it under false names. I set up layers of privacy, even planted fake details, made up jobs, phantom trips, posts about nights out that never happened. At school, I sat down with a counselor. They didn't minimize what happened. They called it what it was. Not physical harm, but a psychological attack. Emotional violence. Trauma. The fallout was everywhere. My stutter came back harder, words tripping over themselves whenever I spoke to strangers. Apologies spilled from me like a reflex. If someone brushed my arm or tapped my shoulder, I flinched so hard it embarrassed me. But I recognized the signs. I wasn't unraveling. I was adapting. My artwork shifted too. In class, my designs darkened, jagged lines, heavy shadows choking the figures. One professor pulled me aside. "These feel anxious, Lena, but they're honest." I nodded, because they were me. Jess didn't push me to talk, but she left little offerings, vintage postcards, old fountain pens, nudges toward letter writing like David, the fake David, would have loved. I kept them tucked away. I couldn't pick them up. 4 months later, I feel steadier, stronger in ways. I've started sitting in coffee shops during the day, sketchbook open, though I choose my seat carefully. Not near the door, never with my back to the room. When I park, I angle my headlights toward the sidewalk so I can see clearly when I return. Tonight I sat in a small cafe in Springfield. For the first time, I didn't obsessively check the windows. I drew a flower, soft petals, but a stem rooted like iron. I still can't bring myself to sit in a fast food booth alone. Maybe I never will. But I've learned something crucial. Not every gentle voice belongs to a gentle person. Terror can come cloaked in calm tones and kind words. The real test isn't about being brave in the cinematic sense. It's about preserving yourself. I'm learning to listen to my gut again, to respect the instincts that kept me alive that night. Because safety isn't negotiable. Because intuition deserves respect. Because a warm smile can hide a predator. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. That isn't paranoia, that isn't exaggeration. It's truth. And I won't silence mine again. They say the holidays either pull you home or push you farther away. For me, it was a messy kind of both. It was the Thursday before Christmas, December 21st, and I had just stumbled out of another night shift at the Burger King on West Florida Avenue in Tampa. My shirt smelled like fryer oil, the grease stains on my chest pocket already set in from hours ago. The paper name tag was still pinned crookedly above my heart. I hadn't even bothered to take it off. I was too tired, too wired, running on a mix of caffeine, the stubborn momentum of routine, and this shaky, desperate idea that maybe, just maybe, driving 6 hours overnight would fix the 3 years of silence between me and my mom. Georgia wasn't far, not if you drove straight through without thinking. No calls ahead, no warning, no chance for her to tell me not to come. I wanted the shock of knocking on her door to be the bridge I hadn't been able to build with words. So I tossed my duffel bag and a plastic grocery sack full of wrapped gifts into the back seat of my beat-up '09 Civic. The air still smelled faintly of fryer oil clinging to me, but I cranked the heat anyway, rolled my shoulders, and pulled onto I-75. The sodium glow of Tampa thinned behind me. The farther north I got, the more the city smeared into stretches of farmland and silence. Around Inescapable, I cut over to Route 41 to dodge some construction. The world tightened there, trees pushing close, the shoulder shrinking until there was none. The dark didn't feel like regular night. It was the kind that swallows you, the kind that makes headlights look weak and nervous. 3 hours in, just as I was fiddling with my phone to switch playlists, the dashboard lights hiccuped. A flicker, then another. A cough from the engine, like it had swallowed water. And then nothing. Dead quiet. My Civic gave up mid-stride, coasting reluctantly until it stopped in the absolute middle of nowhere. No houses, no gas stations, just black trees stacked like walls, their tops jagged against a starless sky. Cold air pressed against the glass as I sat there staring at my useless dashboard. I grabbed my phone, squinted at the screen. Barely 1 bar of signal. Miraculously, a call went through. Roadside assistance. "Tow's on the way," the guy on the other end said, his voice tinny, full of static. "Sit tight, 40 minutes, maybe less." I told myself that was fine. Annoying, but fine. 40 minutes in the dark wasn't a story. It was an inconvenience. Except 20 minutes later, I realized the heat had drained completely. The car was bleeding cold faster than I could rub life back into my fingers. I killed the engine all the way, thinking I'd conserve what little battery was left. My breath puffed pale in the air. It was quiet. Too quiet. Not highway quiet. No hum of far-off cars, no wind in the branches, just a vacuum pressing against the glass. Then the headlights dimmed. Flickered once, twice. Gone. My chest sank with the dark. I blinked hard, leaned forward to squint through the windshield, and that's when I caught it in the side mirror. Movement. A figure. Slow. Deliberate. Someone walking the line of the road, stepping out of the tree line without a sound. No flashlight, no car anywhere, just there. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I hit the lock button, the doors thumping closed around me. My heart felt like it had tripled in size, thudding against my ribs. The man didn't stop. He didn't wave, didn't shout for help. He just kept coming, steady as if the road belonged to him. Then, like it was nothing, he turned off into the woods again. Vanished. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of retreating steps. But then he reappeared, on the other side. The passenger side. As though he'd circled behind the tree line just to prove he could. And this time, I saw his face. He came close enough to press his cheek to the glass, his breath fogging little circles on the window. His lips moved barely at all when he whispered, almost intimate, "You still wearing your little crown?" The words landed like a blade in my stomach. I knew that voice, that face. 2 months ago, I'd kicked him out of our Burger King after he cornered a customer in the lobby. I remembered the way his eyes locked on me, unblinking as I told him to leave. He hadn't cursed, hadn't argued. He just walked backward out the door, still staring, like he was memorizing me, like prey. And now here he was, whispering at my window in the middle of Route 41. Panic doesn't make you scream, it makes you quiet. It strips everything down to math, distances, angles. How fast could I run barefoot on frozen asphalt? Would the locks hold if he yanked the handle hard enough? I slid out of the driver's seat slowly, crouching into the back seat to put metal between us. My phone trembled in my hand as I typed fast, thumbs fumbling. Text to Rena, guy from BK stalking me. RT41, that's all I managed to type before the signal died. Please send cops blinking unsent on my screen. No reply, no bars. I smacked my fist against the seat, not loud enough to echo, just a muted thud of frustration and fear. Outside, he was still circling. I could hear the crunch of his boots against the frozen dirt, slow, deliberate, like he was timing it with my pulse. Hands stayed in his coat pockets, no hurry, no panic, just ownership. Then came the faint click of a door handle. Passenger side, back door. Tested. Then the rear handle. Another click. Finally, the sound that nearly unstrung me. the dull pop of the trunk latch like he'd found the lever. My chest cinched so tight it felt like I'd swallowed wire. I shut off every light I could, ducked flat across the backseat floor, my body wedged between bags and vinyl. My breath slowed into shallow gasps, not enough air to feed panic but enough to keep me invisible. He circled again. The sound moved around me like a predator in grass. Then, so faint I wasn't sure I hadn't imagined it, I heard it. A laugh. One short, sharp exhale. Not mirth, not humor. Just acknowledgement. And then silence. I counted in the dark. 60. Then 60 more. My phone was a dead weight in my hand. My muscles ached from holding still. And then, just before salvation arrived, I heard it. His voice, softer than breath, right by the glass of my window. "Merry Christmas, Tyler." Hearing my name snapped something in me, like ice cracking underfoot. He hadn't just remembered me. He had been waiting. The tow truck's headlights finally carved through the black-orange strobe sweeping over the trees. I sat up fast, heart hammering, scanning. The road was empty. He was gone. Just gone. The driver climbed down, burly in coveralls, his breath fogging in the air. "Battery, huh?" I didn't say a word about the man. My voice came out small, rehearsed. "Yeah, just needs a jump." He nodded like he'd heard worse at midnight. Maybe he had. He hooked my Civic up to the flatbed while I climbed into the cab, every nerve in my body screaming to watch the tree line. Each shadow looked alive, stretching, waiting. We rolled into the next town around 1:15 a.m. I paid cash for the jump, avoided small talk, and then I pulled into the neon-lit safety of a motel parking lot. And I sat, engine off, eyes open, not sleeping, not even trying. The next day I made it to Georgia. Mom opened the door, surprised, her face folding into a smile. I hugged her hard, forcing my voice steady. "Just wanted to surprise you." We talked, but it wasn't real. Just filler, weather, TV shows, old neighbors. My mind wasn't there. It was still on Route 41, replaying the whisper, the fog on glass, the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't locked the doors, if I hadn't recognized that voice in time. I cut the visit short, left 2 days early. Back in Tampa, I begged for day shifts. When that didn't cut it, I handed in my 2 weeks. That was the last time I wore the paper hat, the name tag, the grease-stained shirt. Now I work differently. Freelance mornings, study nights, pepper spray in the glove box, phone always charged. I check the back seat before I drive, every single time. I haven't seen him again. Not really. But when my phone buzzes at night, I still glance at the window before I answer. I've started using burner numbers, reshaping my online life until I'm more shadow than person. It feels safer that way, safer to be hidden. What stays with me isn't just his face or the whisper, it's the fact he remembered. A random shift lead in a paper crown, insignificant to me, but not to him. He waited until I was alone, until I was weak. That kind of hate doesn't vanish. It lingers like a stain. Some jobs end when you clock out. Others come home with you. Always trust your instincts, especially when someone feels off in a way you can't quite explain. Not all threats announce themselves. Some wait, some watch. And sometimes the hardest part isn't surviving the night. It's convincing yourself the night is truly over. I was 15 when everything shifted, the kind of shift you can't explain until years later. Back in Liverpool, we lived in a cramped 2-bedroom flat, stacked right above a Burger King on Derby Street. The ceiling rattled with fryer vents, the air smelled like old grease, but it was home. My dad ran a little antique resale shop a few blocks away, and though it barely kept us afloat, he wore that street like a badge of honor. My younger brother and I spent weekends there, dusting shelves that never seemed to stay clean, chasing customers with clumsy enthusiasm, and sneaking downstairs after closing time to beg the night crew for leftover fries. It was noisy, messy, and imperfect, but it was ours. Then came the phone call. I remember the way Dad answered, how his face drained in real time, like the color had been sucked out of him. He stood with the receiver pressed to his ear, jaw tight, lips barely moving. I'd never seen him look so small. Within 3 days, we were at Liverpool Airport with barely packed bags flying across an ocean I didn't want to cross. Seattle. Just like that. When we landed, we drove out to Kirkland, Washington, a quiet stretch that felt too wide, too neat, too silent. And yet, almost mockingly, there it was. Another Burger King, sterile and polished. Nothing like the one that had been our backdrop back home. No graffiti, no kids loitering by the door, no familiar shouts from the street, just empty parking lots and fluorescent light. I hated how much my accent stuck out. Every word felt like a marker that I didn't belong. Dad's jokes, once the rhythm of our evenings, fell flat here. Even my mom, who claimed this was about quieter air, a fresh start, couldn't hide the way her smile twitched at the edges. My brother cried in the back seat of the rental car our first night, and I almost joined him. I picked up a part-time shift at the new Burger King, partly for pocket money, partly because I needed something to do with my hands. Same red and black uniform, same routine. Nothing familiar. Until him. The first night I noticed him, I was clocking in. Tall, clean-shaven, a coat buttoned a little too high, his shirt collar stiff like he'd stepped out of another decade. His left hand was scarred, mottled with old burns, and it always clutched a folded British newspaper. Not the local Post-Intelligencer, but the Guardian or the Times. Always British, always foreign, like me. He chose the same table every night, ordered nothing but black coffee, and every time I moved across the dining room I felt his eyes on me. Not curious, not bored, watchful, measured. At first I tried to brush it off. Some guy just sits there with a paper, staring. I told my roommate from school. She laughed and said maybe he was just lonely, but something about him didn't read as lonely. It read as patient. One evening, when I was clearing trays near the counter, I overheard Dad's voice from the back room. Low, sharp, angry. Words like shipment, authentic, ghost invoices. Words I didn't understand, but words that didn't belong to the man who used to joke about Victorian teapots. My stomach tightened. Whatever reason had dragged us across the world, it wasn't antiques. The next night at work, I couldn't stand it anymore. The dining room was nearly empty, fryer hum filling the silence. I wiped my palms on my apron, walked straight over to his table and asked, "Do I know you?" His hand froze on the mug. Then slowly he folded back the paper, revealing that thin, deliberate smile. His voice was low, almost kind, but it carried weight. "Not yet," he said. "But I knew your father in Glasgow," before he started lying. My breath caught. Glasgow. Antique dealer. My dad. I stumbled through the rest of my shift in a fog, and the moment I got home, I cornered him in the kitchen. The house was dim, Mom already in bed, toast crumbs still scattered across the counter. "You know that guy at the Burger King?" My voice cracked, shaking harder than I wanted it to. "He says he knew you in Glasgow. He said you lied." Dad stopped mid-motion, dishes still dripping in his hands. For a moment, something naked flashed across his face. Fear, raw and unmasked. Then he tried to cover it, reaching for excuses. "Old colleagues," he muttered. "Travel business. Nothing important." But I could see his hands trembling in the sink water. But I didn't stop there. The words just spilled out of me, louder and sharper than I meant them. "No more excuses. I want the truth." Dad dropped the dishcloth like it had burned him. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked decades older. "Fine," he said, voice hoarse. "You want the truth? I was involved in selling memorabilia, refurbished pieces, mostly World War II stuff. Helmets, medals, shell cases. But some of it wasn't real. Some of it was black market." He rubbed his forehead, eyes raw and bloodshot. Fake invoices, forged documents, restaurants overseas, Burger King franchises. Those were fronts to move shipments. Glasgow got too hot, too many questions, too many people starting to look closer. I just stared at him, my heart hammering in my throat. So we moved across the world, not for a better life, just because you were running? He opened his mouth, then closed it, and that silence was worse than any confession. The lie wrapped itself around me, choking me. All the pride I'd had in him, in us, cracked. I hated it. Hated him for making me complicit without even knowing. I slammed the kitchen door hard enough to rattle the frame and stormed out into the night air. I didn't sleep at all. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw his trembling hands in the sink, the fear in his voice. By morning, the smell of grease and fryer oil from my uniform made me nauseous. 2 days later, I stuffed a single plastic bag with my things, wrote a blunt letter of resignation, and dropped it on the manager's desk at Burger King. Dad didn't argue when I told him. Maybe he couldn't. A month later, he was gone too. No big farewell, no confrontation. Just a folded sheet of paper left on the kitchen table. Choose who you want to be. I chose a path. I'm sorry. I moved out not long after, into a cramped little apartment above a second-hand bookstore. The air there was musty with paper dust, but it felt clean in a way fast food grease never did. I started working in the shop, sorting donated books, cataloging them in the back room. It was small, quiet work, honest work. I avoided Burger King like it carried a curse. Even seeing the red and yellow Crown logo on passing kids made my stomach knot. Now, I'm 19, 4 years gone. I'm studying literature at community college and still working at the bookstore, living in the quiet I used to think didn't exist. But some things never really leave. Every so often I catch sight of him, the scarred man, at a bus stop, reflected in the glass of a grocery store window, across the ferry terminal, standing with his newspaper folded under one arm. He never approaches, never speaks, just watches. And my stomach still tightens, but I don't run anymore. I've learned to stand still, to meet eyes, to watch back. Looking back, I realized the scarred man wasn't just a threat. He was a mirror. Proof that the past never really loosens its grip. You can cross oceans, change accents, change jobs, but the shadows follow. They sit beside you at dinner, echo in your father's silence, surface in the clink of a coffee mug. When I pass a Burger King now, I don't see a fast food chain. I see a stage, a place where men traded secrets behind greasy counters, where invoices were faked, where the scars people carried said more than their words. That's why I keep a small notebook tucked in my jacket pocket, notes about objects, their provenance, their history, their truth. I'm studying archival curation now. Someday I want to preserve things properly, not just surfaces, not stories smoothed over with lies, facts that hold up, verified, untarnished. Because if I've learned anything, it's that the truth matters. I never thought fast food would feel so hollow, but there I was, 26, working the graveyard shift at a rundown Burger King just outside Cordon's Edge. It wasn't supposed to be my life. A year earlier, I'd been teaching English in Louisville, convincing myself I had a future in classrooms, not behind fryers. Then the budget cuts came, my contract disappeared, and suddenly I was staring at eviction notices. The restaurant became a stopgap, a way to buy time, but time here moved strangely, thick, fluorescent, and endless. By 9, the manager always vanished, leaving the place to me and Riley. He bolted the second 2 a.m. hit, practically sprinting through the lobby doors. Most nights after he left, it was just me. The fryer hissing like static, the buzz of a drive-through speaker no one used, and the kind of silence that stretched too long between cars. I'd find myself praying for interruptions, anything. A half-drunk security guard, a late-shift cop, even a minivan full of teenagers ordering 20 nuggets. Anything to remind me that the world kept moving. That Sunday in late October dragged. I clocked in before midnight, headphones pinched over one ear so I could half listen to syrupy Top 40 while I mopped the lobby and dropped baskets of fries into oil. The hum of the lights made my head heavy. In between chores, My mind wandered to the law school application I'd left half-finished on my laptop, to the way I used to tutor kids during summer programs, their eyes lighting up when they cracked a word for the first time. It felt like another life, a better one. Near closing, everything slowed. Last mop strokes across greasy tiles, last fries sizzling in the vat. The place smelled faintly of bleach and old ketchup. I leaned against the counter, waiting for the buzzer, thinking about how many ways my life had detoured. Then it rang. Not the normal three-tone beep of someone ordering, just one long, held buzz. I adjusted my headset, thumb pressing the receiver. Hello? Nothing. I frowned, glancing at the camera feed. Just fog rolling past the drive-through window. No headlights, no outline of a car. Hello? I asked again, trying to sound bored instead of uneasy. The speaker hissed with static, then a voice. Low. Male. Can I come in? I used to work here, I remember you. Something about the cadence lodged itself in me, as though my memory should recognize it but didn't. My shoulders tightened. The words crawled under my skin. I turned toward the window. Outside was nothing but fog spilling across the lot like smoke. One failing street lamp cast a weak circle of light, but beyond that the lot was empty, until I noticed the car. A battered sedan sat across the street, engine off, lights dark, just idling there like it had been waiting. I told myself I had to finish closing. Routine. I grabbed the trash, pushing the side door open just far enough to roll the bin out. The cold air cut through me. I stepped forward, then froze. Someone stood there. Gretchen. Frail, cardigan hanging from her frame like it belonged to someone else. I remembered her. Summer afternoons when she wandered in, asking for coffee she couldn't pay for. Customers said dementia. I'd watched her shuffle off more than once, clutching air as if it were a purse. Her eyes met mine now, blank but heavy, as though she wasn't looking at me so much as through me. He's been waiting for you, she whispered. Her voice scraped low, fragile, but certain. He never left. The trash bag warmed in my hand. My throat went tight. I wanted to say I didn't understand, to tell her she had the wrong person, but the rumble of that unseen engine across the road made my pulse spike. I let the door shut hard, the lock clicking back into place. The sound echoed through the tiled lobby like a gunshot. Gretchen didn't flinch. She just watched through the glass, still as stone, until finally she turned and shuffled into the fog. Silence dropped. Too heavy. The fryer hiss had stopped. Even the drive-through speaker went dead. I could hear the wall clock ticking, steady and loud, every second dragging closer to 1 a.m. I backed away from the window. My chest ached with how fast my heart was going. All I wanted was sound, light, people, anything but that nothing. With shaking fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. It's me. I'm at Burger King, Maplewood Drive. Someone's outside. I heard a voice through the speaker. My own words came out in gasps, the line cracking like a walkie-talkie losing signal. Please hurry. I crouched behind the counter, heart hammering so hard I felt it in my ears. My hands fumbled with the sauce packets scattered across the counter. I lined them up stupidly, like they were some kind of shield. My eyes locked on the security monitor. The speaker hissed again, and the voice slid through, steady, gravelly, too familiar. You locked me out once, not this time. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My headset pressed tight to one ear, muted so I wouldn't answer by accident. On the monitor, headlights flared inside the parked sedan. The driver's door opened. A man climbed out, tall, coat-drenched, hood clinging halfway up his head. He didn't rush. He didn't even look at the door. Instead, he opened the passenger side as if searching for something, then shut it softly. He drifted toward the playground equipment, the plastic slide still slick with evening dew. I'd seen kids practicing flips there just hours earlier. He paused, then kept moving, circling the restaurant like a predator tracing its cage. On the cameras, his shape passed from one angle to the next, deliberate, knowing. He had memorized this building. I pressed the fire exit release button with my palm. Nothing. The lock held. A part of me wanted it to stay sealed, another part screamed to flee. I stayed still, headset muted, straining for sound. Sirens, distant at first, wailing faint against the fog. My pulse fluttered. I didn't know if they were coming for me or just passing, but I prayed anyway, whispering into my sleeve. The man stopped mid-stride, head tilting toward the noise. The fog thickened around him, street lamp light cutting just enough to catch his shape. Red and blue strobed against the low clouds. He didn't run. He froze, body rigid for a heartbeat too long. Then, as if the night absorbed him, he slipped back into the fog, vanishing without a trace. Moments later, squad cars rolled into the lot, lights sweeping the pavement. Officers moved fast, securing doors, voices clipped and practiced. Inside the lobby, tape stretched across counters. The smell of bleach and fryer oil fought against the sour tang of fear in my throat. I spoke in fragments, choking between words, telling them about the voice, the sedan, the man in the hood. They searched the property, flashlights cutting through brush and broken asphalt near the abandoned convenience store down the road. Later, one officer told me a woman had been assaulted there not long before. The description matched. The long coat, the height, the patience. They promised surveillance checks, interviews, follow-ups. But by Friday, silence. No calls back. When the shift ended, I packed my bag with shaking hands. Walking to my car under buzzing lot lights felt like crossing open ground in enemy fire. The stars overhead seemed cold, blinking too sharply. My keys dug into my palm until my knuckles turned white. The next morning I quit. I didn't care about paychecks or schedules. The place had changed. The Friars' warmth and the hum of routine weren't comfort anymore. They were props on a stage where something darker had been rehearsing behind the curtains. I stayed with friends for 2 weeks, told them versions of the story, just creepy guy, fog, police. I left out the voice. I left out Gretchen's words. He never left. That part haunted me more than anything. Now I work at a bookstore. Day shifts only. No headsets, no drive-through. I shelve paperbacks and sweep aisles, breathe in dust and ink instead of fryer grease. Slowly, I rebuild. Routines. Trust. But when I drive past that Burger King, my grip tightens on the steering wheel until my knuckles ache. I never open side doors without scanning first. I never ignore the small things, the buzz of a speaker, the hum of an idling car. Therapy taught me something I hold on to. Danger isn't always a fist through the glass. Sometimes it's a whisper through a microphone. I don't teach kids anymore, but I've learned to listen differently, to the silences, the pauses, the fog before something breaks. Never dismiss the instinct that tightens your chest. Never trust calm words just because they sound steady. Even in ordinary places, threats can wait in the static. Voices can carry them straight inside. And if something feels wrong, it is. Always. I moved to Evansville for the same reason most people do after a breakup. I needed to erase myself and start over. Everything I'd built had caved in on me. College, my relationship, the future I thought I had mapped out. I felt like I was walking around underwater, lungs full of regret, waiting to drown. My cousin threw me a lifeline. He managed the Burger King downtown and said he could get me a job and a place to stay. Look, it's not glamorous, he told me over the phone, but it's cheap, technically free. You'll be right above the restaurant. No commute, no rent. Just work, sleep, repeat. That's how you heal, right? I took it. I convinced myself it was perfect. A tiny studio apartment perched on top of a fast food joint, just enough space to breathe without getting lost in it. But the place had its quirks. Wallpaper peeled from the corners like old scabs, the windows whistled when the wind hit them right, and the floor had a particular tile that shrieked every time I stepped on it like a kid demanding attention. Then there was the basement door. It wasn't really part of my unit, just an old locked wooden door tucked against the hallway wall. At night, when everything was quiet, I couldn't stop noticing it. The way the heavy stairs disappeared into a darkness my light switch didn't reach. I told myself not to obsess. A clean slate meant ignoring the rough edges, learning to let small things slide. The first week was almost boring in its simplicity. I worked mornings, shuffled home greasy and exhausted, ate reheated takeout, and collapsed into dreamless sleep. For 5 nights straight, nothing interrupted me. On the 6th, something did. It was around 2 in the morning, that fragile space between sleep and waking, where shame and fear blend together. I heard it, a creak. My eyes snapped open. The sound wasn't in my room but close. Too close. The kind of groan wood makes when something presses against it. My mind scrambled to explain it away. Wind, pipes, the building settling. I forced myself back under, muscles stiff, jaw locked. The next night, it came again. Same time. Louder. Closer. I swore it was the basement stairs this time, the weight of something testing each step. My body refused to move. I stared at the ceiling, every nerve lit like a fuse. By the following evening, my nerves were frayed thin. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over the flashlight icon, and walked to the basement door. My cousin's voice rattled in my memory. "Old building. Nothing down there. Don't worry about it." I hoped he was right. My hand shook as I turned the knob. The air hit me first, stale, thick, cooler than the rest of the building. I descended slowly, the beam from my phone bouncing against the cracked walls. At the bottom, under a single swaying bulb, I saw it. A rocking chair. Antique. Wooden. Half covered in dust. Gently moving back and forth, though nothing touched it. I froze. My chest filled with something heavy, like water flooding a boat. I didn't remember seeing it during the inspection. Not once. That impossibility gnawed at me. I backed away slowly, then faster, until I was out in the hallway again. I slammed the door shut and hit it with my palm, hard enough that my knuckles burned. The next morning, I lied to myself. I told myself I'd dreamed it, hallucinated it. When I mentioned the noise in passing, my cousin just shrugged. "Old place, man. You're wound too tight." But I couldn't leave it alone. That afternoon, I went back down with my phone recording, determined to prove it was nothing. The chair sat there in silence. I touched it. The wood didn't move. No rocking, no sound. Just stillness. Relief began to creep in, until I noticed the chair wasn't where I'd left it. It had been shoved to the far wall the night before. Now it was centered in the room, square in the middle like someone had placed it on display. My stomach lurched. I shoved it back into the corner, stacked dusty boxes on top, and left a note I scribbled quickly on scrap paper. "Please don't rock." That night it rocked anyway. Louder, rhythmic, insistent. I went back down again, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away. My fingers brushed the armrest. The wood was scarred. Burn marks etched deep into the grain like someone had clutched the arms with bare burning hands and squeezed until the finish cracked. Only the right armrest. The left was untouched. Something was wrong. This wasn't loneliness or paranoia. It was watching. After that, I started sleeping in the Burger King break room. I told myself it was easier for early shifts, but really I couldn't stand being alone above that basement anymore. I'd chain smoke outside, down cup after cup of burnt coffee, just to keep myself grounded on the lit-up first floor. My co-workers teased me. "Man, you're hearing the friar whispering secrets." One laughed. I didn't laugh back. I could feel myself unraveling, insomnia chewing holes in me, stress knotted tight in my chest, grief rotting me from the inside. It was the perfect storm for madness. But still, one night after closing, I found myself standing at the basement door again, my hand on the knob, my body moving before my brain decided. And this time, I went down. The basement door wasn't shut that night. It stood open just a crack, enough for a slice of darkness to leak out into the hall. The duct tape I'd been using to keep it sealed dangled loose, curling like dead skin. My throat went dry. I should have turned back, locked myself in my room, but instead, I pushed the door wider and stepped down. The rocking chair was there, tucked into the corner, perfectly still. No swaying, no whisper of movement. Silence swallowed every step I took, heavy and unnatural, as though the basement itself were holding its breath. I pulled my phone out, hands shaking, and started typing notes into the screen. Then it came. A sound. A floorboard shifting just behind me. I froze. My ears strained for footsteps, for anything, but the basement was a tomb again. Still, I knew. The sensation was clear and unmistakable. Eyes on me. Someone, or something, had been moving in the shadows while I stood there pretending I was alone. My chest clenched. I didn't think. I bolted up the stairs, nearly slipping on the worn steps, my heart thrashing so hard I couldn't tell if I was choking or breathing. Sweat slicked my hands as I slammed the apartment door shut and shoved the bolts across. I sat in the kitchen with a flashlight clenched in my fist like a weapon, waiting, begging silently for daylight to come. That night, I finally broke. I texted my cousin. "I'm leaving on Saturday." He didn't answer. I managed 2 hours of restless, broken sleep before the alarm dragged me into morning. I showered at 5, hands trembling under the spray, then clocked in at the grill. My body went through the motions, flipping patties, dropping fries, wiping down trays, but none of it landed. The day was a mechanical blur, my mind still trapped in that basement. By the time I got back that night, I didn't hesitate. I dragged my mattress into my car, stuffed my clothes into duffel bags, and carried them down without a word to anyone. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just escape. Now it's been 4 months. I'm living in a friend's spare room 2 towns over. I make coffee and shelve books at a library cafe, and the world above ground feels quieter, safer, at least on the surface. But the basement follows me. The creaks, the rocking chair, the impossible silence. They never left. I never proved anything. No photos, no videos. Nothing to hand to a landlord or wave in my cousin's face. It could have been stress, or grief, or insomnia warping me into paranoia. That's what I tell myself when I'm desperate to sleep. But the memory of those burn marks carved into the chair's armrest lingers, blackened grooves where a hand had once gripped too tightly. And the fact that the chair always returned to its place, no matter where I pushed it, still gnaws at me. Because that means someone had been down there, someone who wanted me to know. Someone who knew exactly where I lived, how to rattle me, how to wait until I cracked. That thought unsettles me more than anything. I avoid old houses now. Any unlocked door makes my skin crawl. Wooden chairs? I can't sit in one without glancing behind me every few minutes. I sleep with blankets piled in front of me, not behind, as though I can block something unseen from creeping closer. I stop believing I could ever control what waits below me. I bought a new place, 3rd floor, no basement, with a key code entry I check twice every night. Thick curtains smother the windows, blackout panels block the light, and I even unplug the hallway bulb so no flicker sneaks under my door. Friends tease me for overreacting. "Relax," they laugh. "You're safe now." But they don't know me at 2 in the morning. They don't know what it feels like to wake half asleep with a door you thought was locked standing slightly ajar. I don't know exactly what happened in that basement during those long July nights. I don't know who or what moved that chair. But I do know one thing. The worst noises aren't screams. They're the soft creaks in locked spaces, the ones you dismiss until it's too late. Never ignore the sound that unsettles you in the dark. Small noises can mean big danger. And sometimes the most terrifying part isn't proving it happened. It's knowing you were being watched, long after you thought you'd gotten away. I'd been at the Burger King on Crescent Boulevard in Camden for almost 2 years, much longer than I'd ever meant to stay. The job started as a stopgap. My dad had gotten sick, and the steady paycheck kept things afloat while letting me stay close to home to help him. After he passed, the weeks blurred together and I stayed out of inertia more than anything else. Now my transfer to a Philadelphia store had finally come through. This week was supposed to feel like release, like peeling off a suffocating skin. But instead it felt strange, uneasy, as if the building itself didn't want to let me go. Camden nights had a different weight. The steady groan of traffic pressed against the glass doors even when they were shut. The smell of fry oil clung to everything, mixing with the sharp tang of city dust that drifted in whenever someone opened the door. The people, customers, co-workers, anyone who lingered past dark, carried a sharpness in them, too much anger compressed into too little space. Sometimes it felt like even the walls of the place remembered grudges. And then there was Robbie. He worked maintenance, wiry and quiet, the type who blended into corners until you realized he'd been there all along. Officially, his shift ended an hour before close. Unofficially, he stayed. Every night, without fail, he lingered by the side exit, chain-smoking 2 or 3 cigarettes, his eyes fixed inside as if the glass gave him something to study. He never said much, but his presence carried weight. I'd gotten used to the itch of being watched. Or maybe I just told myself that. Monday was my last Monday night shift, though it hadn't been on the schedule until I agreed to cover for Trina. She was new, 17, nervous, still fumbling with the register. Around 8:30, she pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered that she felt sick. I told her to go home, no problem. I'd closed alone plenty of times. By 9, I'd wiped down the counter and was mopping behind the grill when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I froze. At booth 7, tucked back in the corner, sat Robbie, still in uniform, off the clock, but not gone. I pulled off my gloves, straightened my apron, and walked toward him. Any other night, I'd have asked if he'd forgotten something. His keys, his wallet, whatever. But tonight, a dull pressure thudded in my chest, and I forced a lightness into my voice that I didn't feel. "Hey, Robbie, didn't realize you were still here." He lifted his eyes, flat. Not curious, not friendly, just observing. "Didn't feel like going home yet," he said. His tone was soft but carried an edge. "Got time to talk?" I hesitated. He nodded to the booth across from him. The air on that side of the restaurant felt colder somehow, like it had thinned out. My throat was dry as I slid into the seat. "Your last week, right?" he asked, leaning forward. "Figured we could finally get to know each other." He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. And he wasn't wrong. This was my last week. My shoes squeaked faintly against the sticky tile, and my hand brushed the phone clipped to my belt. I slid it loose, held it low, and thumbed out a text to my cousin. "Call me in 2 minutes. Emergency." A fallback move. If things got weird, Peter would have my back with an excuse to leave. Robbie didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. He asked why I never sat with the others during breaks, whether I lived alone, whether I was actually excited about the transfer. His words were casual on the surface, but they pressed like fingers against bruises. I gave quiet, fumbling answers, my voice careful, buying time as I glanced at the clock. Then his tone shifted. "You ever wonder what people notice when they watch you all day?" The words sank like a stone into the silence. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. The kitchen clattered in the background, fry baskets shifting, timers beeping, but it all sounded far away. I felt sweat bead along my spine. My hand tightened on the mop handle I'd leaned against the booth. Robbie just watched me, calm, steady, as though he didn't need to say anything more. His quietness was worse than if he'd raised his voice. I swallowed hard, tapping the mop handle once against the floor just to break the stillness. I kept my back half turned toward him as I repositioned the trays on the counter, trying to keep my hands busy. He made some offhand joke, something about coworkers or maybe the fryer, and I forced a chuckle, the kind you give when you don't even understand the punchline but can't risk silence. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Peter's reply. "Tell him." I froze, the glow reflecting faintly off the chrome of the soda machine. My stomach flipped. I slid the phone into my pocket before Robbie could read anything off my face. He noticed anyway. His eyes followed the motion, steady. "Everything okay?" he asked, tone flat, his expression locked in that unreadable calm. "Family emergency," I whispered, barely audible. The words tasted shaky in my mouth. I drew in a shallow breath. I didn't even finish the sentence. He didn't say goodbye, didn't move, didn't blink much, just tilted his head and spoke so quietly I had to strain to catch it. "You're not going to last in Philly either." Then he leaned back. "Trust me," he'd said. I didn't argue. I didn't grab the mop or finish my work. I just left. Walked out through the side door, leaving the fryer lights on, the lobby stairs unswept, the place half open to shadows. My chest ached until I hit the driver's seat of my car, slammed the lockdown, and finally let myself breathe. My hands shook against the steering wheel. The words replayed on a loop. "Not going to last. Trust me." It wasn't anger that stuck with me. It was the cold weight of it, the way it settled like a warning lodged deep in my gut. The next morning, my manager texted. Robbie had called out. He left a resignation note on the fryer, just a folded sheet of paper, no explanation. And in the silence that followed his absence, the restaurant didn't feel lighter. It didn't feel free. It felt suspended, like the air was waiting for something else to happen. I finished out the week quietly, though it wasn't the send-off I'd imagined. No triumphant last shift, no laughter with the crew. Just routine: clean the back rooms, sweep the floors, stop staring at the clock. When I transferred to Philadelphia, I told myself I was closing that chapter, shutting the door on Camden for good. Now I work at a Burger King downtown, the kind where the counter is always crowded. Cars clog the drive-thru, and noise swallows you whole until you forget yourself. That was what I wanted. Constant traffic, anonymity, a place where people respected personal space because there was no room for anything else. But it's not over. Not really. Even here, I catch myself scanning the dining area whenever the rush dies down. My eyes stick to lingerers at booths, people who don't order much but sit for too long. Sometimes I glance at my manager to make sure she isn't watching before I let myself exhale. Because I know now, it doesn't take shouting or violence to unsettle someone. A person can shake you simply by watching too long, by sitting in silence and asking questions that cut just a little too close. That night in Camden changed me. Not from fear exactly, but from awareness. Danger doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't have to smash windows or force doors. Sometimes it just sits there patient, in a booth under the hum of the lights, quiet, steady, waiting to see how much of yourself you'll hand over. Boundaries aren't optional. They're the line between safety and something else entirely. And the second your body tells you that line's been crossed, you'd better listen.